All right, everyone, welcome to another broadcast of the Destroying Pro-Aborts show. This is going to be the fifth show. For the last few shows, I've been trying to get pro-aborts to come up in here and justify abortion on the basis of, just the general arguments. I'm not talking about, appealing to those sorts of arguments, like life-threatening cases and cases like rape. I'm challenging pro-aborts to justify abortion outside those cases. Give a general argument for abortion, like if a woman conceives in consensual sex, for example, but she conceives at a time she's not ready to have a child. I'm looking for pro-aborts to give an argument for abortion in that context. Because the problem with a lot of pro-aborts I've been seeing is that when they talk about the abortion issue, they often so often like to zero in on those life-threatening cases, in those cases of rape, those horrific cases. You need to get them to stick to general subject of abortion, because, and I've said this many times and I'll say it again, when I've asked pro-aborts to justify abortion, on a general case, if I would ask them, look, I can understand you bringing up those cases, but will you join with me in banning abortion outside those cases? And almost always the answer I get is no. So what I'm trying to do is understand, why do they constantly zero into those cases when that's not the real reason why they get behind the position. I'm looking for pro-aborts to go to the general reason why they justify abortion. I mean, don't even appeal to those sorts of cases. Don't even use those cases for their arguments. Because if they truly believe in a woman's right to choose, then they don't need to use such ridiculous tactics with appealing to such horrific cases. Because the overall majority of abortions which happen have nothing to do with cases of rape or cases of life-threatening circumstances. Most of the time, when a woman is going into an abortion clinic, she's getting an abortion because she isn't ready to be pregnant at this particular time. It isn't because she got raped, or isn't because she wasn't, her life was in danger or something like that. If her life was truly in danger, she wouldn't even be at an abortion clinic. She'd be at a hospital. So I've been challenging pro-aborts for the last few shows to come into my hangout and give a general argument for abortion, which has nothing to do with those cases. If they truly believe a woman should have a right to legal abortion, if they believe in all that rhetoric that they say about she has a right to her body and all that stuff, then they would argue it from that perspective. Elevator music, yeah, that's the Bob Ross thing. I love Bob Ross, man. I used to watch him all the time when I was a kid. If people don't know who Bob Ross is, he was a painter that used to do the show called The Joy of Painting, and it used to show him on the PBS network. So yeah, Bob Ross is awesome. That's why I always play his music every time I start a hangout. Okay. Bina, you back at it again with these text comments. I'm not gonna do this. I'm not gonna debate you in text. I'm not going to discuss. I'm not gonna read your text comments and try to argue the position, through text, because I think that's just a very non-conducive way to even have a conversation. Trying to just read your comments all the time and then argue points. So I mean, I'm gonna post a link here in the chat box so people can come in here. Um, that's the thing, man. Being you already know where I stand on that. I know it's probably not your weekend yet, and where you live in Australia. But I mean, if you got a mic, use it. I'm not about to, go into this text exchange with you, like reading your comments on the side and, trying to argue with you like that. I'm not going to do that. You already know where I stand. I always appreciate you coming in, but I mean, again, that's just how it's going to be. But anyway, I'm just looking for a general argument for abortion. That's all I'm looking for. I'm looking for people who think they can logically argue their position, who claim to be pro-choicers. I find it very dishonest that they zero in on these cases in order to argue their position, because it shows to me that they're trying to emotionally manipulate the discussion. They're not really coming from an honest point of view. They're not really coming from a genuine point of view when they go straight to these cases. We all know that pro-aborts who get behind abortion, think if a woman ain't ready to have a child at this time, she should be able to get an abortion. No, I mean, we don't need to just fake the phone by saying, "Yay, she could, her life could be in danger or whatnot." That's not why you are, you claim to be pro-choice. That isn't it. Let's just be honest here. That is definitely not it. So, for the last few shows, I've been trying to get them to discuss this issue, and ain't nobody been coming in. So, yeah, this is my challenge right here. I'm throwing down the gauntlet for pro-aborts to come in here and try to argue their position from a general level, not from, these rare cases, these cases that don't even come close to, comprising the majority of women going into abortion clinics. So that's like I said, in one case, they don't even go into an abortion clinic if their life is in danger. They go to a hospital. And in the other case of rape, um, again, that's a really messed up case, but I mean, it's not something that justifies murdering your child. I mean, two wrongs don't make a right. It's a really bad, horrific case for a woman to deal with, but just because it's a bad case emotionally, does not make it an intellectual position to argue. Yeah, something can be, very bad emotionally to deal with, but it doesn't make it an intellectual argument or an intellectual objection to use. So we need to separate emotions out the picture from intellectual arguments. We need to really, really understand the difference. There is so much that we could do for women who conceive and rape, and we could do much better than abortion. I know this from seeing countless testimonies of women who have conceived and raped and have gotten the help and support and love that they needed to get through their ordeals. And I know a woman personally who dealt with that. All right, how you doing, brother Tommy Hawk? Good to see you, man.
Hey, good to see you, Antonio. How are you doing?
Not too bad, man. I'm just challenging pro-aborts to come up in here and give a general argument for abortion, not these life-threatening cases and these cases of rape that they like to zero in on most of the time to emotionally manipulate the conversation. I'm challenging them to come up in here and say, look, if you claim to be pro-choice, give an argument for abortion. Like, you think, a woman conceived at a time she's not ready to have a child, she walks into an abortion clinic, point blank. Giving an argument for that, not these rare cases that do not even come close to comprising the majority of why women walk into abortion clinics.
Yeah, that's always irritated me that they use those extreme cases as a way to justify the across the board abortion on demand argument. I mean, I think and I'm as pro life as probably one can get, but if they wanted to go that route, I would be happy to oblige and allow abortion just for those extreme cases, as like in rape or incest, and then outlaw the rest of them. I'd be glad to do that, but that's not what their intention is. They're using that as a, what's the word, a wedge? It's not a wedge, but they're using these extreme cases to justify this across the board abortion, and so it's irritating. But yeah, I think that's what they need to actually justify the killing of the unborn child on demand, and because that's what the law is, so that's what they should be defending.
Exactly, and that's all I'm trying to get them to base their position on. I mean, if they truly believe in it, if they truly believe in this quote unquote choice of theirs, they shouldn't need to base it, on these emotionally driven arguments. They shouldn't need to do this. They should just have just logic. But I think they mostly know that they cannot muster up an argument logically. That's why they need to have this endless need to manipulate the conversation emotionally. All they try to do is just distract and try to misdirect all day, and it's not really. I don't know. I guess to those who don't really pay attention to maybe the untrained pro-lifer, they may be tricked into it, but it doesn't fool me. I don't let. And I always ask them every time, would you join with me in banning abortion outside of these cases, outside of cases like these? And most of the time they say no.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're not. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say or ask you. I mean, it's my experience, and probably yours too, that just like the other night we're talking to Hog Tie, and they so very often will say, "Well, I'm personally pro-life," but then they go on to say, "But I do think abortion should be legal for those who want it." So
I'm sick of that claim too.
It's almost every time they'll almost always say that they're personally against the act. I mean, it's just an argument. It's a way of arguing, a way of debating, I think. But it's, to me, I mean, when are people going to stand up for what is actually right? I mean, if abortion or murdering an unborn child is wrong, then where are the people who are actually going to stand up for what is right and make it illegal? That's the issue.
Exactly.
So all these people who claim that they're pro-life personally but believe it should be legal, I mean, you could do the same thing with rape or murder. You could say, well, I think rape is wrong, but for those who want to do it, I think it should be okay. I mean, that's just as ridiculous of a stance.
Well, how's it going, Jackson?
Oh, hey, Antonio. I'm just here to listen.
Oh, all right, cool. But yeah, I think you're right, Tommy. I tell them that all the time. It's like you really can use the same thing for rape or unjust torture and all that other stuff, but they're never able to deal with the point. All they try to do is say, well, this person is born and whatnot. But I mean, well, so what? All I gotta do is use the same arguments you used to dehumanize and basically demoralize the unborn, and say, well, I could just say this person isn't a person, and then they'll try to appeal to law and all this other stuff. And they'd be like, well, wait a minute. I thought your position had nothing to do with law. Like, because even if abortion was illegal, you would still think it was wrong to keep women from getting abortions. So I thought your position wasn't based on law. Now you want to turn to the law all of a sudden? They just contradict themselves like left and right just real quick. It doesn't take it. It's not hard to get these people to trip over themselves, man.
Yeah, well, it's an illogical position. But were you surprised the other night when we were talking to Hogtie that he was making the argument that I don't debate these people too much anymore anyway, but when I have in the past, they very rarely made the argument that he did, which was he believed that the unborn baby or the unborn fetus, or I guess any stage during development, he agreed with us that yes, it is actually a living person, a human being, something that's alive. And so many of them will argue against that and say, no, it's just tissue. It's not even really it's not a person because it's not born yet. And so, things got out of control for whatever reason the other night when I was on with Hogtie. I certainly try not to get like that. But I wanted to kind of pick his brain, and because it seems to be a contradictory position. If he's going to say that's a living, breathing human being inside there, how he can then have a pro-choice position? It seems really it seems to me if you're going to be pro-choice, you would almost have to say that they're not a person or that they're not alive.
Well, we never really, I agree. We never really got to that, and hopefully he comes into a hangout sometime and we can discuss those positions. Because, the first thing I said was that if you think for any reason that it's okay to just brutally kill the unborn to death, I don't care what method you use. Any method to me is just brutality against a child. Whether you do it with a pill or whether you do it with a surgical procedure, I don't really care what you use. It's brutal murder at the end of the day to me. Mm-hmm. And for any reason, especially outside of those rare cases, you think this should be even permissible at all. I don't really see how you can value life. And because he kind of said that he was kind of offended by me saying that, and for the time being, I just told him I would remain neutral on his position on that. But I'm still kind of in the back of my mind being like, I don't really understand how you can really value life like that if you think there should be any reason, especially outside of those horrific cases to where you should be able to just kill the unborn. And he tried to use the example of self-defense to back his argument, which I thought was really, really bad. Because he said that if you are forced to, maybe have to kill somebody in self-defense, does that mean that you don't value life? That's not even the same thing, not even remotely.
No. Yeah, that sounds. I don't know where he would have pulled that out of and how he would have made that have anything to do with the abortion debate. I didn't hear it, but you're right. They do come up with some wacky excuses sometimes. So, have you come across anything that is even remotely a good argument because I know you've heard several people. Has anything stuck out to you as a legitimate intellectual or morally way to justify this act?
No, not a single one, not one. I guess all right, but if I absolutely had to pick one quote unquote best argument, I would say that that they try to use the self-defense argument. Like, for example, what they'll try to say is the least they'll try to say that in the same way somebody has a right to kind of defend their body from being infringed upon without consent, and they apply that to the unborn in sort of a self-defense manner to the least what was that concept called? It's called the necessary force. There you go. It's they try to use the argument of necessary force that the pregnant woman has the right to use necessary force to stop her body from being used, and they try to frame it in sort of a self-defense context, which abysmally fails on a number of different levels. Because here's the thing about self-defense. Self-defense means that in that particular moment, while you're getting attacked by an assailant, you're gonna do whatever you can to initiate self-preservation. I mean, it's not like it's a switch you could turn on and off. In pregnancy, they could literally, claim that, I don't want to be pregnant right now, so I would go get an abortion. But hey, they could change their mind and be like, well, feel like,
Antonio,
hold on, what are you doing, Jackson? I'm trying to make a
check
point,
the
man.
side chat. Check the side chat.
Oh, okay. You're talking about Hogtie. You can come in here, man. The link is above. We can talk about this Hogtie. But anyway, as I was saying, I don't even know where the heck I was at. I done lost my train of thought now.
I'm trying to think myself where you were.
Where the heck was I?
You were saying that a woman said that she would, even though she was pregnant, she would like backtrack.
Yeah.
Yes. If a woman, felt like she wanted to keep her child, she could be like, yeah, I'm gonna keep my child and I'm not gonna get an abortion. But her feelings may change like 2 days later and be like, I'm gonna get an abortion, and her feelings can kind of fluctuate.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how self-defense works.
Mm-hmm.
When you dealing with self-defense, it's not like somebody's like punching you in the face, and mid-attack, you're gonna be like, I'm gonna let this person punch me in the face, and then you turn a light switch on and then defend yourself again mid-attack. That's just stupid. You can't apply self-defense to abortion. It doesn't work to pregnancy. It doesn't work the same way. Self-defense is sort of an immediate response to self-preservation. That's not how it works in pregnancy. And
Yeah,
I tried to hear them use those sorts of arguments, and that's probably the quote-unquote best one I've ever seen. But even that one abysmally fails for obvious reasons.
Yeah, that would only apply in the case where the woman's body or the woman's life is in danger. If she was in danger of dying because of that, of being pregnant, then I guess you could use the self-defense argument. But otherwise, no, it's not anything the same. It's basically just a selfish.
But other than that, man, I really haven't heard like anything that was even remotely anything remotely of substance. I mean, at the end of the day, you really can't justify murder no matter how hard you try. But again, that's why I have these hangouts, because there's not too many people that are willing to consistently have hangouts like this and talk about it. But but all the time, I'm just thinking about those 2,500 to 3,000 kids that are being brutally murdered every single day, and wondering why ain't nobody say anything about this. Why is this just like something that's just people just kind of just go about their day like it isn't an issue, and we call ourselves America? Come on, we can do better than this.
Yeah.
And we can do better for women in these horrific situations. There's a better solution than abortion.
And I think I may have been saying it last time, but there is a long waiting line of parents who can't get pregnant.
And I just want Halter to come up in here.
Can you hear me?
He's more than welcome to come in here and we can talk this issue out. I don't want to sound like I'm misrepresenting his position. I didn't think I was, because from what I remember, he said that he does find at least one reason, outside of cases like life-threatening instances and rape, to where he would think it would be something that a woman should be able to pursue, if I remember correctly. But I mean, it's possible I'm getting his position wrong, but he's more than welcome to come in. I'm just we'll just see.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
You might have to reset, Tommy. I can't even hear you, man.
Okay.
I didn't know Tommy's AJF, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can
you hear me?
I can't hear you though, but can type in the side chat if you can hear me.
Okay, how about now? Can you hear me now?
Hold on, let me reset real quick.
Okay. Can you hear me, Hogtie? Hello, hello, hello. Hello, can you hear me?
All right, this is crap. I still can't hear anyone.
Okay. Well, he says he can hear me, and I can hear you. Can you hear
All
me?
right, I'm going.
No. Okay.
What the heck is going on? So y'all can hear me, but I can't hear y'all. For some reason, I can't hear anybody else. I'm gonna try to reset again.
Mm-hmm.
This is weird.
How about now, Antonio?
I can't hear any of you at all.
No.
Oh, okay, I can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
That was
Maybe,
so weird.
is my volume up to where it maybe should be?
Yeah, you sound fine. Like, just it was working fine when you first came in, and for some reason, the audio issue just came in out of nowhere.
Huh. Well, I guess it resolved itself.
That was crazy.
Well, where were we?
I think we were trying to see if we properly represented Hawtine's position right.
Yeah, I don't even know, because we got into something. I don't even remember what happened the other night, but if the wheels flew off, and I don't know exactly how or why, but yeah, he said he's got goodness.
But anyway, I don't really care about all that other stuff right now. What I'm trying to find out here is I'm looking for, how do people who claim to be pro-choice go about justifying abortion outside of cases which have nothing to do with rape or life-threatening cases? Like if a woman just is not ready to be pregnant right now or isn't ready to have a child and she goes into an abortion clinic, how do they justify that position? That's what I'm looking to hear.
I'd like to see some of these pro-abortion people. You know how they've got those new cameras out? Like, if you were to set one of these people in front of the camera as one of these abortions is being done, and I know they wouldn't all change their mind, but I'd like to. It would be interesting to see if, after watching the brutal act itself, how, what percentage of them could really, in their heart of hearts, think that that's okay.
I don't really think. I honestly believe nobody, honestly, whether they admit it or not, thinks abortion's okay. In fact, a lot of them will be some of them, heck, even a fairly substantial amount of them would even say that nobody really likes abortion. I've heard that, a lot. So, I mean,
Right.
what's not to like about it? What's not to like about it? I mean, it's not like you're really killing a person. You're not really killing a human being, or from their perspective, it's not like they're really dealing with anything serious. It's not like the same thing as killing a born infant or a 30-year-old adult, for an example, from their perspective. So, I mean, what's not to like? What's there to be negative about it? I mean, what's the problem?
Well, you know, they look at it.
It's not
They
the
look at
self,
it.
right?
They look at it from the perspective of the mom, and her you know her rights, and her being a strong woman, you know, and so if you're going to restrict her right to be a strong woman, then that's an assault on her, you know, and that's despicable. And so that's how they're going to look at it. I don't think they look at it from the perspective of the baby. So,
Yeah, yeah.
but we do. We look at it from we you know yeah it's
Do look
great.
at it.
It's great that we want to protect the rights of people, but only you know we protect the rights of people to a certain degree, and but if those rights end up hurting somebody else or killing somebody else, then you got to actually look at what you're protecting. And so I think when you put the two together, something's got to give, either the quote unquote right of the mom or the right of the infant to live. And I think you know, yes, I mean it would be nice in a perfect weird sort of world if both could happen at the same time and everybody could be happy. But unfortunately, you know, something's got to give, and so it's either going to have to be the quote unquote right of the mother to kill her baby, or um, the the baby's going to live. So can't
I
have
think
both.
absolutely, and I think it's important to understand that what we're saying is, look, we believe that a woman can preserve her autonomy, but she don't have to do it by killing her offspring. She don't have to do it. She can have full autonomy, yet at the same time, she don't have to kill her offspring to do it. I mean, why can't we love them both? Why can't we care for them both?
Yeah,
I mean, if this issue is just really about you just not wanting to be pregnant right now, then I mean, when it all comes down to it, that's just beyond selfish. I mean, here's the bottom line: as I was saying in the hangout earlier, in the hangout I did the other day, um, when they talk about having the right to control their body and what's in it, I think it's a really just stupid argument, at least the way they go about it, because the way they talk about it is like super like non-beneficial. Like, for example, if someone wants to lose weight, they may have to cut out certain foods. If they like eat certain junk foods that's not conducive to them losing weight, they'll have to refrain from eating certain foods that are not conducive to their weight loss regimen. They'll have to show some sort of restraint, you know, to eating certain types of foods and eat better and make better decisions. And but if they can do that, they're showing, you know, that they have real control over their body. They're showing that they don't let their urges and their cravings get in the way of their goals. And in the same way, if a couple or a woman isn't ready to have a child at a particular time, then she should show restraint and refrain from having sex at a particular moment or at a particular time. Show that restraint. You know, be abstinent or be celibate at a particular time if you're not ready to bring a child into this world at this time. You know, you're showing that you have like real control over your urges and over your desires, and you don't let those desires control you. To me, that is the maximal benefit and shows that you have real control over your body, and it's a real benefit to you, and you ain't got to worry about killing a child in the process, and you ain't got to worry about getting pregnant or anything. But you want to try to have it both ways. You want to try to get your rocks off and not have to deal with the consequence at the same time. And I don't think you should be able to have it both ways. So if you really truly care about true control over your body, then you conquer your urges and refrain from having sex at a time you're not ready to bring a child into the world. And to me, that is the real um, meaning of controlling your body and showing what's mostly beneficial to you.
yeah.
But that's not what they argue, though. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, well said. I mean, absolutely. I mean, what you're talking about is just basic personal discipline, and that's such a it's such a art form that is just so, with today's society, it's so alien to so many people. People want to basically, if it feels good, do it, and they'll deal with the consequences later or not, or figure out a way to get around the consequences or whatever. But yeah, I mean, there's so little integrity in the world nowadays, and discipline is part of that, and responsibility, and none of that is taught, hardly in schools or really in society. I mean, it's almost like a free-for-all now, and it's too bad. It's too bad that personal responsibility and personal discipline, personal integrity, personal morals, that all this stuff is in the picture, or should be, or used to be, and is not anymore. And it's really kind of sad. And it's kind of like I see Hog Tie's back. I'll wrap it up. I was just going to say, I used to debate this abortion stuff a lot a few years ago on different forums, but there's so many people now that you can tell just talking to them that they're so undisciplined in pretty much every area of their life. They're either on drugs or just angry, just miserable people, and so there's going to be no way that you can get to them or through to them about this issue, because they're just I don't know. It just seems like an immature society that is gonna, the abortion issue is just the perfect example of something where the easy way out is what society is going to push, and it's going to be popular with the masses because the easy way out is always popular with the masses. Anyway.
Shocked to hear a description of abortion as the easy way out. Isn't the easy way out, birth control? And
yeah, well, you'd think.
And just so the audience knows kind of what was going on in the side chat there. It's funny because actually this Hangout had only been running a few minutes, and I had just clicked into it, and I heard Tommy mentioned something Hog Tie, and I was like, what? Well, that's weird. I just clicked on the thing. So I went back and listened from the beginning, and I see you were referring to our earlier conversation, and I do feel that my position was misrepresented, though I acknowledge that Antonio, once he saw me point that out, was pretty quick to say, well, I don't want to misrepresent your position. How's about you come in and explain it? I thought that's more than fair. But I was in kid bedtime, the kid bedtime zone there, so I popped in and sent that message. Then you guys had some audio problems. Now, since that time, I was listening over Bluetooth while getting that stuff done. And Tommy, you just opened the thing you were just saying with good points, well said, in response to Antonio. And I was literally going to say those words, good points, Antonio, well said. Now, that's with regard to your points about that really where the abortion issue comes down to is a conflict between I don't want to use the word rights is a little bit charged, but it's the best word we can use for now. But the rights of the mother and the rights of the unborn baby, and that's why, in my view, it's a difficult issue. Is because anytime you have rights that come into conflict, we have to have some method of determining whose rights prevail. And at the outset, I mean, there are very few circumstances that you can envision where someone's right to being alive comes second to someone else's right to do pretty much anything. Right? Like if I'm driving my car and I've got a green light, I have a right to drive through that intersection. But if there's a pedestrian in front of me, like, can I drive over that pedestrian because I have the right to drive my car forward? Like, they just, you know what I mean? Like, it's so rare. Like, where would you think of a circumstance where somebody's right to be alive comes second to somebody else's right to do pretty much anything else? But I do think, I think that was a very good point. I do think that is why for some people this is a very difficult issue, because it's rights that come into conflict. Just to wrap up on this point, I will say I for the most part, I mean, I agree a little bit, but for the most part, I disagree with everything you guys have said after that about how this is, to whatever extent, an issue of personal responsibility. I agree a little bit because I'm really bothered by the not the possibility, I know this is happening, that some people are using abortion as a form of birth control when a responsible person has many other options. And some people use abortion as a method of escaping parenting when what they could do is have the baby and give the baby up for adoption, which takes a little bit of, yielding of your personal freedom, but it's worth it. Like the positive change you bring to the world, it should be an option that's considered. And a lot of people shrug and they don't do that. So I'm going to agree with you guys in that sense, that there are a lot of people that don't sort of look at those first steps. But I in general, I disagree with that, because of what it sort of leads to, that, well, the reason people have abortions is because the whole world's going to hell in a handbasket and people just don't know anything about personal responsibility. And therefore, the right thing to do is to punish these people who have a poor sense of personal responsibility by making them parents. That to me is the bigger thing I'm more uncomfortable with.
Well, nobody said a thing about making them parents, man. Nobody said anything about that at all. I mean, they don't have to be parents at all. If they want to adopt their babies out to someone else, there's open and closed adoption. They don't have to be parents.
Yeah.
And again, I don't think there's a conflict at all. I just think that's just a stupid, sort of, well, I'm not going to say you're being stupid or anything, but I think that's just ridiculous reasoning that people have just conjured up in their minds. I don't think it's a conflict anymore than, parenthood or guardianship in general is a conflict of rights, because you wouldn't say, a parent raising their child, is a conflict with their personal autonomy, with their property, with like their house and their food or anything like that. So I don't really think, that's a conflict at all. I just think certain things, don't factor into the picture whenever you're a parent.
Yeah.
Well,
there are many
parent or whatever.
There are many. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There are many relevant differences between having, say, a 10-year-old child in your house versus having a 12-week-old fetus in your womb. There are many relevant differences there. So.
One.
What's that?
Name one.
Name one.
One relevant difference, which you couldn't use to, like, say, I don't know, like put your newborn infant outside of your house and just leave them till whatever happens to this infant happens. But you can do the same with abortion. What's the difference? If we're talking about securing autonomy or whatever, why can't we apply the same type of autonomy to property, personal property, or anything like that? Like your house or something like that. But it's perfectly fine to do that, with the unborn. When you try to use your bodily autonomy, why can't we apply this in the same context of other source of autonomy?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I understood the question you asked me, but that last little bit of what you're saying, I don't really get what you mean by it, or how it connects to what you're asking me. But you don't want me to answer. Okay.
Let me explain it like this. A woman says she has, bodily autonomy, so she can exercise her right to, extract the unborn from inside of her body, because her body is her property. That's her exercising her autonomy. Well, why can't you do the same thing for a born infant? Say, you know what, this infant is in my house. This infant is in my house, my property. This infant can eat food that I buy, which is also my property. Why can't I just put this infant outside my door and just leave this infant to, whatever happens to it is not my problem?
Well, that's what I'm saying. There are some. That's why I tried to answer your question about. There are some relevant differences between, and I use as an example, a 10-year-old child versus a 12-week-old fetus. But we could even say like an infant, a 1-month infant or a 2-day infant or something. One, what I think would be an obvious difference is the complete dependence on the mother's body. And let's not kid ourselves. There are circumstances where somebody has a baby or even has a young child, and they get to a state where they simply say, I cannot be a parent. Now, judge that as you wish, You can say, well, that's too bad. I mean, that was irresponsible. But a good society, what I would, is a subjective thing, but I'm just saying, I think you would agree that a good society is one that's able to come together and deal with those situations. Every state and every province I know of on our continent has a rule that says if you
Safe
have
haven laws.
what?
Safe haven laws.
Yeah, the safe haven laws, right? So that if you are a parent, you have responsibilities, and if you just abandon your child somewhere, you're in huge trouble, unless you do it at a place where safe haven laws apply. And you can take your 2-day-old or your 10-day-old. I mean, you can have a baby in a hospital and leave the hospital and not take the baby with you. And it's got to be an awful thing to go through, and we can look at that and judge how we wish. But you know what? On balance, don't you think we're better off that our societies have a system where we say, look, as long as you take your child or infant or whoever it is to a place where they can be taken care of, like to an approved location, you don't leave them in the middle of a mall, right? Then we can't criminally charge those people for abandoning their children. Like, let me just ask, do we think that's okay? Are we agreed that that's an okay thing, or do people have concerns about that?
Oh, I have absolutely no problem with that, and yes, we definitely are a caring society, and I have no problem with that. But here's the thing, though. That's the extent of the quote-unquote obligation the mother has, is just making sure the baby gets to a safe location. That's literally the extent of her obligation. Beyond that, she more or less doesn't have any obligation at all. So she basically, her obligation is like very little, in the grand scheme of things. She just got to say, okay, here's a safe haven location, done deal. And the reason why we allow that is because we are a caring society, not because we have some sort of obligation to be like, okay, why should if she doesn't want to take care of her child, why should anyone else who's not the biological parent, have to assume the obligation of taking care of her child? Why should anyone else? Why should it be society's problem? But because we're not just some sort of apathetic society, we allow that sort of thing, to help out women that may be in difficult situations yet care about children at the same time. But let's say we were to say, okay, we allow this because we're not disgusting people, but it's not because we have to. I mean, at the end of the day, we're only doing it. We're at the end of the day, we're doing it because we want to see the child survive. Because if we didn't really care, she could. I mean, if we didn't really care, if she had no real obligation, she could just leave the child just to die, and society wouldn't have to give a crap about it.
It would be, in my view, and I do want to get sort of loop this back to the abortion issue, but it would be a very strange society, in my view, would be one that decided to protect children, and including infants. We're talking about the post-born, by making laws that said, if you're a parent, you have to do all the routine parenting things. You have to feed them on schedule. You have to keep them safe and secure. If they have medical problems, you got to take them for proper medical treatment, etc. We make all these, and there's a lot of responsibility, and I don't just mean like sort of good person responsibility. I mean legal responsibility. You can get in a lot of trouble in most of these jurisdictions for not giving your kid like just at least minimal care. It would be a really weird society that would make those kind of laws, and then at the same time would also make it illegal for a person to walk away from those responsibilities when there's somebody else who's in a better position to do it. And that's why I think the safe haven laws make sense, because we say, look, you have all these responsibilities, but if you're not up to it for whatever reason, we're not going to question your decision. We're willing to downshift it to you have one responsibility, as you say, Antonio, and that is just get your kid to a place that's safe, do the paperwork you need to do, and then you can walk. And you cannot ever be criminally charged for that. And like I say, I think it would be a weird society that didn't have that sort of an option. But I want to bring it back to the abortion issue, because again, we're talking about a person making the choice, and again, we're sort of leaving this vague. It's a black box. We don't know why this parent or pair of parents have made this decision that look, we're just not ready to have. We simply can't cope. Maybe she's got mental health problems or financial problems, or maybe she's 14, or that's a bad example, because 14-year-olds actually can't abandon their kids. There's different issues. But anyway, the point is to say, for whatever reason they make that decision, then, okay, they've got an infant at home, or they can't take care of this infant for whatever reason. We're not judging those reasons. What if they just said, like, it's like if I owned a motorcycle and I was just like, look, I can't afford the gas and insurance for my motorcycle, so I'm just going to leave it in the garage and throw a tarp over it and never put fuel in it or change the oil or ride it or do anything with it. You wouldn't care. That would be fine. But for somebody who went, well, I can't really deal with the stress of having a kid, so I just leave it somewhere in my house or leave it in a dumpster somewhere, like, that's horrific, because all you had to do, all we asked of you, was to take that baby to a safe haven place. And that, given that what was at risk, what was at play for the baby was like a baby's life, that's a reasonable thing to expect of parents. So that's why the safe haven laws, like when you're asking, I want to take it back to abortion. So the relevant difference between a baby that's a month old versus, say, a 12 or 14-week-old fetus is that it is, on balance, really not that much of a burden, let's call it, on the mother to say, look, if you don't want this baby, you can't kill the baby. You can't leave it somewhere to die somewhere. All you need to do is to get to a safe haven location, and you can walk. Right? That's a reasonable thing. It would be totally unreasonable for her to say, well, I don't want to even do that, so I'm going to let the baby die. The relevant difference here is with a 12 to 14-week fetus, we can't set up similar circumstances where she can say, look, I don't want to do this. I can't go through the pregnancy. This is life-destroying, or whatever her reason is. I'm addicted to drugs. Whatever her reason is. We can't create a mechanism where she can take her 12 to 14-week-old fetus and fill out some paperwork and then let somebody else have this 12 to 14-week-old fetus. Do you see what I mean? That to me is a big relevant difference. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, let me address that, because it seems to me all you're really saying is, well, as long as there's somebody else there to take the child off her hands, she can't just leave the child to die. Because it's not because it's not really because she has any sort of rights, but only because someone else is in the picture. Because if someone else wasn't in the picture, it'd be perfectly okay for her to just leave that baby just to die somewhere. It seems like to me the only hinging point of your argument is that somebody else is around, so she has an obligation to leave the child to somebody else. But what if nobody else was around at all? Let's say she's on a plane or something, and it crashes on some sort of island somewhere, and they're like stranded, and as far as we know, there's nobody else around.
Mm-hmm.
Could she then just leave her baby, just to just die somewhere?
I find that baffling.
Would that be morally justified? Because there ain't nobody else around to take her child off their hands. But could she just leave her baby to just die?
Yeah, I find that baffling. I really don't know how that addresses the point we're making. Like this is one thing I find very difficult about these conversations. Is that, I mean, you'd asked a specific question about, when I said there were some obvious relevant differences between a 12-week-old fetus and a 10-year-old child or a 1-month-old infant.
But hold on,
and then I was answering that question, and then you said, well, what if there's a plane crash somewhere? And then, well, I mean, presumably most women who were pregnant in a plane crash and then, were stranded somewhere and went to term and had the baby and had a living baby would also do the things they would need to do to keep the baby alive. But if for some reason she wasn't able to do that, because now we're also going to add to it she's got psychological health problems or whatever it is, whatever reasons why she says she can't do that, and she abandons the baby, then that's sad. I wouldn't even know how to judge the morality of it.
But hold on,
how do you judge somebody in those circumstances?
But hold on, you said that that literally you cannot set up a situation like for a 12 to 14 week unborn fetus to have the child be given to somebody else or anything like that. So
Hmm.
it's literally like you're only saying that, oh, because somebody else can take care of the child, that's literally the only reason why she
Oh,
can't just
no,
abandon the
no,
kid.
no, no, no. Okay, I see what you're getting. I see what you're getting at. Well, then, no, then you do miss my point. And that's my fault because I didn't clarify sort of the other side of it. So we've got two people, one that's got a 12-week-old fetus, the other one's got a 2-day-old baby, and for whatever reason they decide I can't go through with the next steps. Right now, the one lady has got, I've lost count of it. She had 25 weeks of pregnancy to go through, and then she'll have a baby. The other woman already has a baby, and she's got to go through diaper changes and late night feedings and all these other things, right? So they're in very different circumstances. What do these two women need to do to get clear of their responsibilities? To just say, okay, I cannot deal with this. I cannot deal with the next steps. The lady who is got the baby at home and needs to feed the baby, she needs to get through like one more diaper change maybe, one more feeding maybe, but get yourself to a safe haven drop off, do what paperwork you got to do, and then you can walk. Those babies' needs are now dealt with. That baby now can go on to be a healthy baby, healthy infant, healthy toddler, child, grown up. Right? That's a life that is just like spread its wings and flown. Right? The other woman, however, when I say it's not just that there's nobody there to take the fetus, it's what she still has a commitment that nobody else can take over. Right? There's no way for her to there's no way for her to not be pregnant and still have the baby live. Maybe that's the simplest way to put it. That's
But
really the
nobody
biggest
else,
difference.
but nobody else could take over if she was stranded with her child on an island somewhere. If nobody
Yeah,
else was there except her, nobody else could take over either. So if
yeah.
you're gonna use the can't nobody else take over point, then by that same logic, she could just leave that baby to just die on the island and just like go about her business.
I'm baffled. I'm baffled by your example, because again, it's got to do with what needs to be done next. Like this other woman needs to be pregnant for 25 more weeks, and it's not just the time. Being pregnant isn't easy. Like there's a lot of issues with that. Um, uh, Again, I think in the context of creating human life, that 40-week commitment to being pregnant is not, it's worth it. But other people make a different assessment about that.
But the examples are mirrored in this way. In the 12 to 14-week-old example, you said that she's the only one who can fulfill that sort of commitment. But if she was stranded alone with her baby and no one else was around to take the child from her, she's the only one who could
Okay,
fulfill,
your example.
she's the
Okay,
only one who could fulfill the needs of that child. And by
okay, but
that
she doesn't. Okay,
logic,
okay, but
wait,
no,
hold
no.
on.
Oh God.
Hold on. By that
Yeah.
logic, if she can just extract the unborn child out her body because she's the only one who can fulfill it, then she can just leave her baby to die because she's the only one who can fulfill that obligation in that circumstance.
Yeah, you're doing this weird thing where you're saying I need to now contrive a set of circumstances where Hogtie's logic, as you put it, would apply. Okay, well let's try to salvage your example
No, it's
then.
not contriving
Okay, my
anything.
turn.
It's
It
not
would be
contriving anything, dude.
you're talking about a person in a plane crash that is pregnant and yet doesn't, or no, and then has a baby with her, or is
Mm-hmm.
pregnant in the plane crash and then has the
Mm-hmm.
baby by herself, and then for some reason decides she doesn't want the baby. How is that not? That's contrived. That's what that is.
Well, it doesn't matter
I'm
what
not, I'm
the
not saying.
reason.
Listen, hold on.
It doesn't
Don't
matter
get
what the
offended by the
reason
word
is she
contrived.
abandons the kid. It doesn't
Okay.
matter what the reason.
Okay. To save your analogy, what would have to happen? She would. Okay, all she has to do on the island is feed the baby and find some way to deal with the poop. Um, you got to bathe them, got to keep babies clean, kind of important. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward. She doesn't need in order to keep. There it is. I got to check my clock when that happens so I know what the train schedule is by your house. In order to keep that baby alive on the island, she doesn't need to jam the baby back up into her womb and stay pregnant for another 25 weeks. right? That's what I'm saying is the relevant difference. The relevant difference isn't whether or not there's somebody there to catch the baby when I say I don't want to be a parent. The relevant difference is the level of personal, and I mean the commitment, personal commitment, and I mean the commitment of the person, the actual woman's body.
That's very subjective, sir, because there's a tremendous personal commitment in either case to care for that child. In a horrific circumstance.
No, you interrupted to miss my point. I'm sorry, Antonio. You interrupted to miss my point.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, man.
Because I use the words personal commitment, and then I immediately clarified commitment of the person, like the physical person. And I mean that because I understand when we use the word personal commitment, you mean things like, well, I have personal commitment to my cross-training program. Like that's not what I mean. I don't mean like I have personal commitment to eat more celery. I mean the commitment of the, maybe I should say bodily commitment, right? Like it's the relevant difference, but let's just stay focused here. The relevant difference between having a baby that's outside the womb versus a fetus that's inside the womb is that for some period of time that person with the fetus has to be pregnant with the fetus and everything that entails, whereas the person who has a baby has a considerably different limited set of responsibilities. Both of those babies are dependent, right? I mean, the baby will die if you just walk away from them, but pregnancy is a different deal than just having a baby that you got to feed.
Well, it seems to me all you're doing, Hogtie, is just arbitrarily asserting, different. Hold on a second. Hold on a second.
Awesome. I love how when that happens, there's literally no warning. It's just boom, train whistle. I'll say that
anyway.
I love your use of the words arbitrary and subjective.
But it seems to me all you're doing is just sort of being like, well, there's this sort of arbitrary, more more of sort of I guess.
Sorry, is this your honest characterization of my argument? Is this your honest characterization of my argument?
Importance or more of a strain, or I don't know, for lack of a better word, when the baby's physically attached to her body. But I mean, either way, she's still using her body to take care of the child. I mean, whether she physically changes the kid, feeds the child, with like through breastfeeding, changes the kid's diaper or whatever, she's still using a number of different sorts of things with her body. The only difference is the physical link to her body, and it seems like you're just making these arbitrary standards to say that the physical link to her body magically makes the situation different.
Okay, you know what?
Again,
Antonio,
you're just using the sort of
autonomy
argument with the body part, and I could just sort of use a different sort of autonomy with like the autonomy to my personal liberty.
Okay.
Maybe I don't want to feed this kid anymore, or.
Okay.
Are we having a volume problem again?
Having what? A what problem?
Oh, man. Are we having the volume problem again?
I don't know. I hear you fine. Do you hear me fine?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you just came back in.
Oh.
I don't know. I wasn't able to hear you, but anyway, as I was saying.
Well, no.
Like,
can I just stop
hear what I said?
Yeah, I did, and I'm not interested because I've my basic response to the question you're asking is there is a relevant difference between a woman having a baby inside her body and a baby outside the body, and rather than honestly, Antonio,
arbitrary, sir.
It's not working tonight. I don't know what your problem is. Is it a technical problem that you can't tell that you're interrupting me, or you don't give a shit what I'm saying? I'm not sure which it is.
Oh, go ahead and finish.
Okay, because what I'm doing is I'm suggesting we move on to another topic, because from where I'm sitting, this is what I hear. You've asked me, You know, I've made the point there's a relevant difference between having a baby inside the body and outside the body. I think you would agree that there are differences, and we can discuss, you know, what that might mean, or should that somehow lend itself to a decision one way or the other on abortion access. But instead, you're arguing the point that, well, it's pretty much the same thing. And further, you're declaring a defeat of my position by labeling my position subjective and arbitrary, which are not arguments. That's not arguments, though. You're just saying. I mean, if you can win any argument by saying, "Oh, well, you're being subjective. Oh, well, you're being arbitrary." Oh, okay.
It is what you're doing.
I guess I lose. No, it's not. How is that subjective or arbitrary?
All you're doing is begging the question to suggest that there's some sort of more greater sort of you know, difference with the being physically linked to the body, sort of you know, autonomy, as opposed to, you know, the baby being outside. I mean,
okay. Well, you might disagree with that, but you're not defeating it in any way by labeling it arbitrary. I think there's an obvious relevant. I mean, sorry, is it the case that you're saying that there's just no difference between the baby inside the body or outside the body?
Of course, there are physical differences, but to say that it's a greater sort of importance as opposed to the baby being outside the body is literally your personal opinion.
Okay. Well, I honestly, there's no discussion to be had. You might want to choose a different topic, but I'm telling you honestly, Antonio, if your response to a point being made by another person is to say, well, that's your opinion. What did you want? What did you want? We're having a discussion about our understanding of the information and the conclusions we've come to and our opinions. Well, and if your view is that you can say, well, that's your opinion. Oh, okay. Well, Antonio, why don't you tell me, should abortion be legal?
Well,
that's your opinion.
Explain.
Okay, conversation.
Let me build you know, a further basis for why I'm saying what I'm saying, because I can say, well, look, it's not, you know, just some you know, lesser importance or whatever that you gotta birth the baby, you gotta feed the baby, you gotta get up at all times of the night to make sure that this baby's all right. You know, there's all sorts of things you gotta do. I mean, it's not, you know, just this super easy thing, because nobody would say that taking care of
nobody says it's easy.
Right, and there's quite a few things you got to do, and I mean, you can imagine a situation to where, you know, maybe she would have to do like a lot of breastfeeding or something, and, you know, things like this. I mean, you can use all these sorts of arguments to say, look, there's quite a few things you got to do to take care of a child that's born. And I could say, well, because of all these things, this is sort of a greater importance than, you know, merely the child being inside connected to her body. And I mean, all she really has to do is just you know, keep herself well fed, and in turn her child will survive. And I could say that, you know, some sort of greater importance when the child is born as opposed to being inside her body. But I really think just your position of greater importance to the child being physically linked to her as opposed to a born child being outside her body, as opposed to, you know, the child's well-being and how the child is sustained, I think your position is just arbitrary.
Yeah, well, that's your opinion. Oh, look, I won this time. Like, honestly, is that how it goes?
Oh, okay, so
first up, you're the one who's referring to greater importance. I don't know what you mean by greater importance. You've several times said that that's what I'm saying.
Well, for lack of a better term, it seems to me like you attaches some sort of greater importance, you know, when the child is unborn and physically.
Well, try to use the words that I used. I said relevant. I said there are relevant differences, and I'm just trying to get you to concede that there's a difference between a woman having a baby outside the womb that she can hand off to somebody else for a short period of time, longer period of time, or even indefinitely, versus having a fetus inside of her body. You seem disinclined to answer that. Can we just move on? Because honestly, Antonio.
Hold on a second. No, we're gonna deal with this issue here, because if she cannot just hand our baby, if she's in a situation to where she can't hand her baby off to somebody else, then how do you say that the differences between these two situations means that it's somehow a more stronger position that the baby is physically linked to her, as opposed to she can't, hand the baby to someone else and the baby's outside of her body and she has to take care of the body in that sort of way? How do you base your argument without being totally arbitrary?
Because it's totally obvious, and I'm
obvious to who?
Hold on. 0 more times I will put up with you being dismissive and saying that's your opinion, that's arbitrary, you're being subjective. If that's your style of actual discourse on this topic, I'm not interested.
That's very dishonest of you to just say that that's just my style.
It's very dishonest of me to point out that that's what you've been saying repeatedly. I
gave a very specific, detailed argument as to why I think you just picking the physical direct attachment as opposed to the non-physical care.
You're disagreeing. I don't know why. But
the only difference is the physical direct link. That's it, as opposed to you using your body in a different sort of way.
There are other differences.
But there's quite a bit of commitment and whatnot required.
Yeah, well, so what? There's commitment in if you've got a 30-year-old, if you're 60 years old and you've got a 30-year-old adult kid, there are still responsibilities to that person. Those relationships demand some responsibility. Obviously, it's very, very different than having an infant or having a 10-year-old or having a teenager or having a 12-week-old fetus. Who cares? That's not the point. I understand how. There are times I feel, Antonio, like you're trying to get my point, but then especially when I point out, okay, well, you're not getting my point, and you're arguing something. This weird contrived lady crashes on a island and has a baby or had a baby or whatever. Why?
No. I mean, you can find that weird and contrived, but it's a very relevant point to make.
Well, I don't mind. Yeah, I don't mind. Let me say it, just to clarify. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with doing sort of moral toy problems. I don't object to that out of hand. Like when somebody says, "Well, let's consider a situation where you had to choose between this and this," because sometimes, like those trolley problems, you must have heard people talk about these trolley problems with these moral questions about, oh, the train's going this way, it'll kill those people, but you can push a button and the train will kill those people. I find those things have a place, right? I don't reject it out of hand. But what I found frustrating about your particular example of, well, let's talk about this woman on an island that for some reason decides she doesn't want to be a mother, it was so far afield from the very, very basic point I was making that, and still haven't had an opportunity to make. It's a very simple thing about how there's a difference between a baby inside and outside. And it was also so long ago, I don't even know where I was going with it. I know Christopher, I believe that's Christopher Hitchlap, has something to say. Can I, before you do that, can I just warn you, because I think you're loud and broken up. So can we do?
Okay, that's what I wanted to check. Is it broken up?
Yeah, it's pretty bad, man.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Let me fix that. Thank you.
Yeah, it was funny because I could hear him pop in a little bit, and it was loud too, eh? So I was kind of like, oh no, don't just.
What about now?
Oh, rock solid.
That's much better.
Okay, I kind of just wanted to check my microphone real quick, but I also wanted to ask, have you heard the trolley problem, Antonio?
The trolley problem. Maybe, I'm not sure. What is it?
It's where a trolley where the conductor has passed out at the wheel is coming down the tracks, and you are standing by a switch where you can divert the trolley down one set of tracks or another set of tracks, and on the one set of tracks there's 3 people standing there. I know I'm not reciting it right. And then on the second set of tracks there's only 1 person standing there, and you got to put away all the what ifs, but if you flip the switch, 1 person is going to get hit by the trolley and die. If you don't flip the switch, 3 people are going to die. Have you heard that before?
Yeah, yes, I'm very familiar with that argument. It literally has absolutely nothing to do with the abortion argument.
Well, it's I think the problem that Hogtie was alluding to is that you're kind of not entertaining any of these hypotheticals when um, or all of these scenarios. You're just kind of throwing them away immediately because, hey, man, I'll even agree with you. You know, abortion is not an easy topic, but you've kind of claimed this moral high ground, and the people that are trying to have an open, honest conversation back and forth and exchange of ideas, you're kind of demonizing them and not even listening. That's my opinion
Well,
because
I highly
it's like
disagree.
this. Watch, throwing kittens in a wood chipper. I'm against it. You go ahead, Antonio. Tear me a new one. You know what I mean? It's just such a it's just a easy demonize everybody who disagrees with you, and it doesn't sound like you're even listening to the points that are being made.
No,
That's
no, no. He doesn't. He didn't give any sort of any like objective difference other than the fact that in one case the unborn is directly tied biologically to her body, and in the other case she's just taking care of her child with her body in a different sort of way. But here's the thing: if someone who's if you're gonna say that she isn't obligated to take care of the child in that way, then why should we assume that she has to take care of the child, with her body in a different way, by putting the child to sleep, by physically like feeding the child, with their hands. It's like she were to feed the baby a bottle, or if to, use her body in that sort of way. It seems like all you're doing is picking this just some particular bodily mechanism and how she sustains the child's life, and arbitrarily picking that one body mechanism as some sort of distinct difference as to where that's justified and the other one isn't.
Yeah, I think you're also responding to an argument that wasn't being made. I think what you had asked me a very specific question, and I was answering that question, and then I think you heard something in that was the launch pad for an argument, and then you started rebutting that argument. I think maybe that's where we kind of got this weird misstep where, and it sort of makes sense to me then that's why you would start talking with this woman on the desert island. I mean, again, the only thing I was saying, and I would actually have to go back and listen to about 20 minutes ago in the Hangout to even remember why I was saying why I thought this was an important point, was that there's a relevant difference between a 12-week-old fetus, that there are several relevant differences between a 12-week-old fetus and having a 10-year-old child in your home. One of those differences being that the walk-away scenario, that a child or a infant, the mother can take a break for a day or for a week or a month or for forever. Whereas when it comes to a fetus, how does she walk away from the fetus without the imminent death of the fetus? Right? We don't. We have other options when it comes to children. And I thought that was a non-contentious point. And again, I'm going to have to go back and listen to the beginning of the Hangout to even remember why that point was being made.
So here's the thing. As long, because it seems like to me, not only though I see a number of different problems with that. Because number one, I see that if we even have to consider the other life, are we even talking about her personal rights? Because it seems to me you're trying to give some sort of consideration to the other life. When you say we have to look at, if, like, say, I don't know, the 12 or 14 week unborn fetus wouldn't be able to survive if prematurely born. Why do we even have to consider the other life at all? Who says we have to? Because I mean, not all states say that we have to look at something like viability, for example. Like in the state of Maryland, down here in the States, at 26 weeks, in the same way you could get an abortion at 12 to 14 weeks, at 26 weeks you could still get an abortion. All the same. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So it has nothing to do with viability or anything like that. So to kind of throw this other sort of thing in there, that the other life should be considered, I mean, I don't really know where pro-choicers kind of get that in their arguments that
Okay,
the
well,
other life
again,
would have to be considered at
you're,
all.
you're arguing against an argument that wasn't being made. And what's funny, as you're venturing into that, you're making
Well,
the point about many states that rely on, and I think they just changed it in the UK as well, the entire country. They rely on 24 weeks, 26 weeks, 27 weeks. It's sort of in that camp, different for different jurisdictions. But they've come to that point because that's their understanding of the viability limit. Where before, before that, the baby wouldn't be viable. After that, it would be viable. I got to tell you, I have real concerns about that because it is, and I'm going to use the word, it is actually fairly arbitrary. It's not the case that there's some sort of magical switch that gets flipped in the baby. That, oh, I'm sorry, you also referred to my position as magical. I thought that was weird too. Arbitrary, magical, and subjective. But it is difficult to know like when any fetus is going to be viable, and then in terms of the legality of, well, when is it okay to terminate a fetus's life? It is okay, 25 weeks and 4 days, but then after the weekend, now that it's 27 or 25 weeks in some states, I lost track of what I was saying. 25 weeks and 4 days, but then after the weekend, well, now it's 27 weeks. Well, now you can't, right? That's a very difficult thing for abortion because it doesn't matter where you draw that line, that's going to be there, and I think that's a really, really serious problem for supporters of abortion rights. But again, Antonio, you're arguing a point that hasn't been made, and it's a little frustrating because it's sort of where people feel like, well, I'm not really getting my say because you're arguing against something and it's not. Can I address?
There's a reason why I brought that up.
Yeah, okay.
The reason
viability, that's literally how they come up with that term. You say it's got nothing to do with viability, but that's literally why they come up with a 26-week statute or 24 in some places. Sorry.
I get that, I understand that, but the reason why I brought that up is because how pro-aborts, argue these positions, they just seem to just be all over the place. Because like when you look at the laws, some laws are looking at viability, and then when you look at how some pro-choicers would be like, well, I don't really care about the other life being considered. The only thing that matters to me is that she has a right to her body and what she does with it.
And I get your point. But go ahead. Yeah, I get your point.
Yeah, it's just these sort of all over the place sorts of positions. What I'm asking you is like, where does this sort of the other life should be considered come from? Where does that, for the pro-choicer who's arguing abortion, why should the other life be considered at all? I mean, if we're going to say that the unborn is if we're going to say her body is her property, and we're going to say things like, well, the unborn can't survive at this point in like 12 to 14 weeks, it seems to be saying that as long as the unborn cannot survive outside the womb, she can sort of treat the unborn as property which she can dispose of if she wants to. But if the unborn cannot survive at a certain point, then she can't potentially survive later on, then she can no longer treat it as disposable property. And it just doesn't seem to be any sort of consistency at all.
Okay. Let me address that point about the consistency and about your reference earlier to the pro-aborts, which, by the way, you do not call me even once in any of your hangouts. I walk when you do that. It's offensive, and it does not represent my position. But let me, and I think on this point about the pro-aborts being all over the map or not having a consistent position or whatever else, I want to tell you something that I think I can be of great service to you here. I think if you listen to this point, I think this will be something very helpful for you in your discussion with people that have a different position than you on abortion, or even different position with other things in life. And that it goes like this: talk to the person you're talking with. It is not at all a criticism of a group of people who have a different position than you when individual members of that group disagree on the details amongst themselves. So, for example, and I'm not here to debate this issue, but just for example,
Well, I was talking to you. Well, hold on. I was
no,
talking
no,
about
I'm
your
addressing.
particular
You just
position,
raised a point.
and you wanted to move. I was
Not-
talking about your exact position and addressing it, and you wanted to
no,
move.
you were not talking about my position. What you just said had nothing to do
Yes,
with
I
it.
was.
It had nothing to do
Yes, I
with my
was
position.
earlier.
No, it literally
No,
had nothing
no.
to do with my position. I said that whole thing was.
Earlier, when we was talking about the example,
Okay, so you're not
you
going to let
was
me
like,
finish this point. Okay.
when we was talking about the example earlier, you said you wanted to move to something else. I was addressing your exact position right there. So
No, that's
don't
not, no. I
try
can
to,
tell you that is
you
not my
know,
position. That is not my position. But
no. I was dealing with the whole logic about dealing with the difference between the unborn connected straight to your body biologically in pregnancy as opposed to a newborn infant. I was dealing with your specific position around that time, and you wanted to move to something
no.
else.
Yeah, no. Well, because you dismissed my position, so we can move on to something else. I'm not going to argue with you and get angry about you dismissing my position. I'll just point out you've dismissed it. We don't agree. That's fine. But the thing is, what you just were talking about now, you were talking about the viability threshold, and more, and you bracketed it by saying, okay, you said three things. First, you said that pro-aborts have different opinions on this. They're all over the map. There's no consensus. Then you made the point about the viability threshold being the thing that they don't agree on. And then you repeated that, well, look, these people are all over the map. They don't have a consistent, it's an inconsistency. It's an inconsistent thing. So I'm now addressing that particular point, if you'd permit me, because I think there's something I can point out in there that helps the conversation an awful lot. If you're not interested in hearing it, it's your room, and that's fine.
I'm not saying I'm not interested in hearing it, but
Okay,
when you
well,
seem to make this sort of accusation that I'm not, really trying to address your position, that's just ridiculous.
No. I never said. Well, you weren't, but that's not the point. I was saying what I was trying to say, and I know what happened now. You heard half of a sentence in there, ignored the other half of the sentence, and everything else I was saying around it, and you assumed that I was telling you that I thought you weren't listening to my point, and then you reacted to that. That's not what I'm saying. Here's the sentence that kind of threw you for that loop. I said, a good tip is when you're talking to someone, talk to that person. Listen to that person. Have a conversation with that person. I wasn't talking about me. I'm talking about anybody that you're talking with. And I'm going to use as an example something totally unrelated to abortion, and something you're going to identify with a little bit better, I think, is that suppose as a non-believer, I'm talking to you, and I say, okay, so Antonio, you in your view, you believe that Christ died for our sins, right? And I don't get that, because when you look at Christians, like people who say that Christ died for our sins and salvation is available through him, some of those people say that you have to go to confession and you have to eat a cracker and drink some wine. Some of those people say that you have to handle snakes. Some of those people say that you have to be born again. Some of those people say this, some of those people say that. Basically, Christians are all over the map. They can't agree. They're inconsistent. When I refer to Christians as people as being inconsistent because they disagree with each other, like you, Antonio, you may hold a perfectly internally consistent view of what it means to be a good Christian. And I can talk to a snake handler who has a perfectly internally consistent view on what it is to be a snake handler, a Christian. But then I can look at the two of you and say, well, there's a difference in the details. Therefore, Christianity is inconsistent. Christianity as a whole system of thought is inconsistent. That's not at all giving fair treatment to the core principles of Christianity by finding two people who disagree about details. And that's what you're doing when you're saying, well, abortionists, pro-aborts are inconsistent, right? You see my point, is that you cannot hear one sentence out of what somebody's saying, or for example, look at this thing about, well, when should the abortion limit be? When should it be? Some people say it should be 15 weeks. Some people say it should be 30 weeks. I've met people in this discussion who said it should be legal right up until the date of delivery, which I think is just, what is wrong with your brain? But that doesn't speak to the core principles about whether or not a woman who's a month or two pregnant should be able to have an abortion. right? It doesn't address that at all. Does that make my point a little more plainly?
Well,
And again, what
well,
I'm saying is, I'm saying don't point to the inconsistency in the details between two different people, and say that therefore that whole position is inconsistent.
well, I didn't bring that. I didn't bring that up to not. I didn't bring that up not to address your argument or whatever. The reason why I brought it up was because number one, you use the 12 to 14 week point, because here's the thing: if a woman has were to prematurely give birth around that time, that baby isn't going to survive. But as opposed to, like, if she prematurely gives birth around like week 27, that child has a greater chance of survival. And 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 it seems to me that your whole point, about you can't give the child to someone else, at the 12 or 14 week point, hinged on the viability argument, did it not?
No,
So it did not.
no.
All right, then.
And you know what? You know what? That you might recall any of the 4 occasions in the last 20 minutes where I told you that that's not what it was about. And
Wait a
and
minute.
maybe that'll be the clue as to yes, it doesn't.
Well, hold on. So if okay, I'll retract that. That was an unfair representation of your position. I apologize for that. But then I would say this:
Yeah.
if your point does not, factor in viability, then what problem would you
No, it
have?
does. It does include viability, but I don't consider the viability threshold the sort of end all be all about abortion access. That is, it's not a simple settled issue for me that, like, well, if the fetus is viable, then you can't have an abortion, but if the fetus isn't viable, I'm sorry. That is a terrible way to put it. When I say viable or not viable, I don't mean in terms of the health of the fetus. I'm sorry. I'm referring to exactly what you were referring to, Antonio. This viability threshold, an arbitrary point on the calendar. Well, it's not totally arbitrary. There's good science behind it, but even that science would dictate that we don't know exactly when that point is. Certainly not for any individual fetus. But the very idea that somebody could pick a date on a calendar and say, well, 25 weeks and 6 days versus 25 weeks and 7 days, there's a big difference there. I think that's a really significant problem for the pro-choice position. I don't think that there's that somehow that creates the rights trump card, where up until 26 weeks or 24 or whatever arbitrary number you want to pick, I don't think that abortion rights are just, well, the mother can do what she wants, and then afterwards I don't think it's, well, then now the baby prevails. I think it's a factor. I guess, you know what, let's look at some of the other things that, like, again, I find it's easier if we go to points that we agree on. Like, we had a couple of women come on the Magic Sandwich Show one time, and they were young women, and I mean young, stupid women. We later discovered that they weren't real feminists, but were the actual sort of modern, I think they call them third wave, like SJW feminists. And in the introduction, one of them had said, like, they were there to argue for improved abortion access, so we were told. And when they showed up, one of them introduced herself. I think her name was Sarah, and she says, well, I'm Sarah, and I go to whatever college. And then she goes, and I think abortion's great. And then she gave like a thumbs up and a winky smiley. And I was like, oh my God, like, you are an awful person. And the two of them argued, like, when we were having this discussion about, like, when is abortion appropriate, when is it not, we were saying, like, well, of course we'd agree that, like, abortion in the last week before delivery, I mean, obviously that's not acceptable. She goes, no, I don't care. Even if the woman's in labor, that would still be acceptable. And we're just like, you're an ill person. Like, you know, what is wrong with you? So if you are asking me, like, what it hinges on, it really does come to, like, that's why I say it's an issue of rights, rights of one versus the rights of another. And when you've got the baby in the week after delivery, all she has to do is keep that baby alive long enough to take it to a safe haven location. And then you've got a human doing its thing, man. That's great. When it comes to the woman who's in the week before delivery and she starts having like, oh, I can't do this, I want to have an abortion now, then no, I'm sorry. Like, body autonomy or not, it's worth it to have you suffer through that last week of whatever your beef is with pregnancy. And I'm going to sound kind of, mean to those women at this point, but I mean literally, because it's a human life at stake. The swollen feet, the hemorrhoids, the pain of delivery, whatever your problem is, I don't care. If there was a woman in the last week of pregnancy and she was like seeking abortion and like saying, no, I'm just going to do it, I'll do it myself, whatever, I would actually support police action to where they would actually confine her in a hospital under supervision and oversee that she actually goes through the delivery, and they would deal with whatever psychological problem she's got afterward. But a week of grief for an advanced pregnant woman to sort of finish baking the little gingerbread man that's in the oven, yeah, I would totally support that. The difference is when you dial it back to 12 weeks and she's still got another 27 weeks to go, that demand for that commitment is especially, I mean, the other factor is what, like I say, the little gingerbread man in the oven, the state of completion of the baby. So when you have something that's at a very early stage, that I can't address this point right now because we have to have a discussion now about the value of human life. But I'm worried that I've already kind of piled too much on. I just want to make it clear this way: is that when I'm talking about the commitment, I'm talking about there's a relative commitment between somebody who's got a baby versus someone who's got a week until the delivery versus somebody who's got 27 weeks before the delivery. There are obvious differences among those. I'm saying that difference is one difference among many between the scenario between somebody who's got a 12-week-old fetus versus a three-day-old baby. There are other issues. I'm saying that's one of them. But the viability threshold is a small issue for me. It's a bit, but not much.
Okay, so this is why I have a huge issue with those who claim the pro-choice position, because like when you really get into the details of these things, it just seems to me that you can like try to move the line all over the place, because you have to factor in viability here, then you have to factor in the sort of commitment here, and then you have to look at well, can the what else would you have to look at? You have to fact okay, like commitment here, then you have to factor in the length of time she can do this here, and then you have to factor in, well, is the unborn developed enough at this point here. It just, I mean, if we just take your position specifically, it just seems like there's no real way to pin down anything. It just seems like to me, it's just it's just very, very difficult to really pin down any sort of method to really analyze your position.
It's a big problem. It's a big problem. And you know something, Antonio, I recognize there are other people here too. I don't want to take up the whole time, but can I just ask people, this is a good point here. This is a really juicy point. And Antonio, you're right. This is definitely an issue for my position in particular. I don't mean like the pro-aborts collectively. I mean my position in particular is that you run into this where do you draw the line issue. As you say, there is not an obvious methodology to pin down an exact point for when an abortion should be permitted or when it's not or under what circumstances, and that creates a difficulty. And there are so many things in life, especially when it comes to social policy or writing laws, where we try to create obvious boundaries. We create property lines between parcels of land, and we create red lights and green lights, and and the yellow line down the middle of the road, so we know which side of the road we're supposed to drive on. We try to create these obvious barriers between right and wrong behavior, even when they're arbitrary things like paint down the asphalt. There are many things in law and in social policy where that's not obvious how to do it. But my response to you, Antonio, which I'll do rhetorically first, but is to say, so what? So what is to be done about that? So we have a difficult issue, as we do in many other areas, like the drinking age. What is it that happens to where I live? It's 18. If you are out on the sidewalk and you're 17 years and I forgot how many days, 365. You're 17 and 364 days, and you're walking down the street with a case of beer to go home and sit in your backyard and drink your case of beer. You're going to be in some trouble. But the next day, it's perfectly legal. You can go to a bar and you can be wrecked to the point of vomiting. And you're not breaking the liquor laws. Like why is that? Well, where you live, it's probably 21. Well, in other people's states, I know the province over from me, it's 19. You know, well, okay, well that's chaos, man. Why is it 17 or why is it 18 here and 19 there and 21 there and why isn't it 19 and a quarter? Why isn't it 17 and 3/4? Like, there and that's just one example, sort of an obvious one. There are many places in social policy. Why is the speed limit 55? Why isn't it 57 and a half? Why isn't it 52.3? That when there's a difficult issue in social policy or in law, you try to come up with a system for how you're going to set a boundary, and different jurisdictions won't even agree on the method. But what that doesn't do is automatically erase the issues that are at play underlying that. You need to have a speed limit, right? You need to have a drinking age, even if it's a graduated system, which a lot of people argue for. You need to have these things. There's good logic to say, well, children shouldn't drink alcohol or purchase alcohol, and adults can. So how are we going to deal with this situation? We don't have an obvious method for drawing that line. Well, maybe some consultants can come into the government and help us decide. Well, what about the speed limit? Well, how do we deal with that? So it's the same thing with abortion. And like I say, just to wrap up on this point, what doesn't happen, because you see this difficulty in my position, which I acknowledge, that there's no obvious scheme to say this is how we're going to draw this boundary. These rights exist here, but not a day later. That doesn't erase those rights entirely. It just means that it creates a very difficult conversation around the so-called boundary issue.
And you say things like, well, so what? And I'll tell you why you can't just simply just say, so what? Because when you try to bring up something like the old drinking thing, I think there's a huge monumental difference between drinking, which doesn't affect, the life and death of someone else. Of course,
Antonio.
Wait, hold on.
No, because you got a terrible habit of this.
Wait, stop, Hogtie.
Go ahead.
I'll let you
Then go.
Yeah. Okay, I don't appreciate that one bit. You didn't like the fact that I did interrupt you a couple of times, and I acknowledge that, and that was not right for me to do. But then I was going to say my point, and then you jump in.
No, because I was stopping you on a relevant point. But I've said press on. Like I don't. It was to make a correction, but if you don't want to go ahead, please.
Good grief! I lost my train of thought now. Oh my.
Well, can I ask you a question then, Antonio? Until you get
go
your
ahead.
okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Fine.
What are your boundaries as far as when it's okay, and what's your thought process on that? I mean, yeah, boundaries about when it would be okay to have an abortion. What are yours?
I think people make this issue way more difficult than it needs to be, because they don't make this issue very, very difficult at all when dealing with a born child. And I think, the same sort of reasoning should be applied when a child is conceived in the womb.
Okay,
That's it.
Is yours just black and white, never ever for any reason whatsoever?
It's like I was saying before people came into this hangout, these sorts of arguments be thrown into the mix, like the rape argument, or a woman's life, could be in danger or whatever. But outside of cases, like those, and and I have ways to where I address those arguments too. But from the pro-choice perspective, outside of cases like those, I think it's pretty clear it's black and white. That when a child is conceived in the womb, outside of such cases like those, I mean, if I'm approaching this from the pro-choice perspective, outside of cases like those, and again, I got answers for those too, but I'm just coming from the pro-choice perspective because this whole hangout for me was dealing with, how, a pro-choicer would argue abortion outside of those cases. And I think once a child is conceived, it is black and white. The child is conceived, you don't kill it, point blank. That's it. In the discussion.
Except when there's scenarios that you just agreed could change the black and whiteness and start to enter into some gray, right?
Well, this whole thing about it's not black and white is kind of a very dishonest argument anyway, because I think most pro-choicers would agree. Hold on just a sec. I gotta plug in my laptop. Give me just a sec.
All right. I think that it's too easy to just say this is how it should be and then pretend to want to have a discussion about it if it's so black and white.
All right, I'm back. Anyway, I think this whole black and white sort of reasoning is dishonest from the pro-choice perspective because I think, like for example, I think the overwhelming majority of pro-choicers would agree that, like I say, like at I don't know, 10 weeks of pregnancy, a woman should be able to get an abortion for any reason. I think most pro-choicers would agree with that. And nothing else should really matter. 10 weeks is not really a big deal at that time. That's pretty black and white right there. And nothing should interfere with that. So basically they're like, well, for no reason should a woman be forbidden to get an abortion at 10 weeks. For no reason. And that's pretty consistent across the board in all the states here in the United States, and pretty much in where most places where abortion is legal, that's pretty much consistent across the board, that early in the pregnancy term. They'll apply black and white logic there, but then they'll say it's not black and white in other places to sort of move the goalposts. So to me, when they say it's not a black and white issue, they're being very dishonest. It's only black and white when they want it to be, and not black and white when they don't want it to be.
Well, why is it black and white for you? Where do you get the ultimate answer on that? It being black and white.
I mean, I think by virtue of being a human being, just by that virtue, you should have the right not to be killed without due process. It's just that simple. We don't make all these sorts of complicated arguments or anything like that once the child is from born humans or anything like that. I think people purposely make this issue way more complicated than it needs to be because they don't want to take personal responsibility. And again, as I was mentioning earlier, they can completely control whether they want to risk the potential for a child to be conceived in a womb or not. If they don't want to risk that potential happening, then they need to exercise restraint and be like, okay, I don't want to risk this happening, so I'm not going to have sex at this particular time. That's really as cut and dry as it gets. But don't try to have it both ways. Be like, well, I'm going to use contraception, but the risk is a child may be conceived in the womb. And if that happens, even when I use contraception, I'm gonna have the way out and just get an abortion. I think they're trying to have it both ways.
Are you prepared to live the rest of your life in a wheelchair, Antonio?
Say what?
Are you prepared to live the rest of your life in a wheelchair?
I'm not sure what you mean by that. Can you clarify, please?
Do you drive an automobile?
Do I drive an automobile?
Uh-huh. Yep. Do you
Um,
drive it?
at the
Do you drive a
current
car?
time, no, I don't have a car.
Well, until you're 100% ready to take on the risks of what can happen when you're driving in a car in an accident, then maybe you should just never drive a car, because that is
And
a possibility.
and that's absolutely right. I agree. If I'm not, willing to take the risk of driving the car, I shouldn't drive it. Point
Right,
blank.
which could end you up, being paralyzed from the neck down for the rest of your life. I think that's kind of um a
If I don't want
strange
to
way
accept the
to.
risk, if I don't want to accept the risk of driving the car, then I shouldn't drive it. Period. If you don't want to accept the risk of potentially conceiving the child, you shouldn't have sex. I think the logic can consistently apply to a number of different things.
So what about birth control? Where are you on that? Do you see that as like where you can get the shot? Do you and I think it'll keep you from getting pregnant for like 6 months or a year or something. Do you see that as like miniature abortion
Well,
or?
as long as the birth control method isn't like what they call an abortive fashion, I think that's how you pronounce it. As long as it doesn't kill the unborn or anything like that, if it successfully prevents conception, then I'm perfectly fine with people using birth control. But what I'm not fine with is people who say, I'm going to use birth control, but just
I'm not sure if it's me or hello is
I heard Antonio speaking quite clearly, and then he said something about birth control, and then he just cut off dead, like it just
okay.
went.
That's
Okay, yeah.
that's what I thought. Well, if birth,
where did I cut
I
off?
can I can hear him now.
you're back.
Hold on.
Well, I guess if we're talking about birth control, then we really do need to know uh, when it's an actual life. That's a conversation worth having for the morning after pill. I guess that would be off the table. Um, and how each one of the birth controls work. Um,
I couldn't hear you for most of that. I had to reset my connection real quick.
I was just kind of
Could you?
thinking out loud.
Okay.
I was basically saying that, if we're talking about birth control, then I guess we do need to talk about when your line of it actually being a human life starts, because I was assuming, I guess, maybe the morning after pill is too far for you. Am I right about that, or is that too far, too close?
Wait, are you talking about like Plan B?
Right.
There's been debate on whether Plan B, is in a bore fashion or not, or if I'm even saying that right. Um,
I think it's
I'm
abortification.
kind of
You may be right.
yeah. I have to look into that a little further. I'm kind of
Sorry.
agnostic about Plan B at this point,
Yeah,
so
let's
I
not
really
confuse.
can't weigh in on that right now.
Yeah, in recent discussion, I've noticed some confusion between Plan B and similar, although Plan B would sort of be the flagship of that group, versus like RU 486, and there would be
Yeah,
many
right.
others in that category. So we're just to clarify, where Plan B renders the uterus inhospitable to prevent implantation. There are drugs that could be taken later that even after the zygote has implanted and attached to the uterine wall, it would be killed by later drugs. My understanding is that Plan B doesn't have that effect. I don't know a lot of people that make
Mhm.
like an ethical distinction between those two. I'm sure that there are some people. Um, in my experience in dealing with especially Christian apologists who take a stance against abortion, they generally, and I'm not pinning this on you, Antonio, or anyone else here. I'm just
Right,
to
right.
comment on
I
the difference
understand.
between those
Right,
two categories of chemicals. Yeah.
right. Well, I think the important pertinent issue here is assuming that again. I'll have to look further into like the Plan B thing and whatnot. But if we are using other source of contraception, let's say a condom, and I don't know, maybe the condom breaks or someone didn't, properly use it right or whatever, and conception happens. At that point, I'm like, it's a done deal. You don't kill the kid, period, and that's where I draw the line.
I didn't want to derail too far, but does this also affect your opinion on death row? I've been curious about that since you've been kind of championing this cause.
I think talking about, are you talking about factoring in like the death penalty?
Yeah, are you just as much against that?
Not necessarily. I don't think that has anything to do with the pro-life issue because I think
it has everything to do with it.
That's why pro-life.
no, the reason why I don't think it has anything to do with it is because the pro-life position is that no innocent no human being deserves to have the right to be have their lives taken without due process, and
Okay.
I don't really think you can connect the death penalty issue to that at all.
I got to take exception with that. I've heard you use that expression an awful lot about the taking of a human life without due process. I find it a strange application to the idea of abortion, because what due process means is that process which is due under the law, so that somebody who decides on their own that a particular criminal just shouldn't be drawing breath anymore, so they go hunt that criminal down and kill them. That would be an example of killing a person who arguably deserves it, but without the due process. The process set is due in law. Similarly, somebody who kills a fetus, either by whatever, like attacking a pregnant woman and whatever, or feeding chemicals to a pregnant woman, or a pregnant woman who does something on her own to irritate the pregnancy to where the baby's lost. Those would be examples of killing. It's not a person, but still killing that human life without due process. But the due process in law, when it comes to abortion, is that process, that legal process that's required to proceed with the abortion. Right, and it includes things like going and making a doctor's appointment and getting an examination and a consulting and a waiting period, and then going to a licensed clinic and getting it done properly. So every legal abortion that is conducted with that process that is due under the law. So I find that a very strange, well, it's strange for a couple of reasons. For one,
Well, I think you kind of Go ahead. Finish.
Well, it's a little bit circular, because I'm saying that every legal abortion is legal, but I mean the protection against having a governmental body take your life without due process, it refers to it's a protection applied to persons. It's not a protection applied to non-persons, including the human life that is a fetus. But even if we were to extend that coverage and say, well, even the fetus should have that basic right, to not have their life terminated without due process. Well, that process that is due under the law is whatever that state says has to be done before that life could be terminated. And in most cases, that means going, making an appointment, getting an exam, having a consultation, and then coming back and having your abortion. So every legal abortion is legal. So I find that a weird application of the phrase due process.
Well, I think you're kind of making sort of a flimsy sort of argument there, because I mean, there was one point to where slaves were not seen as persons in colonial times, but I mean, clearly, what was happening to them was happening. I mean, if you're gonna say that that it was happening with the due process, then fine. But I think there's an obvious reason why a lot of people were against that, because they do in fact believe that they didn't have due process.
Well, I mean,
not because they not because they apply sort of a sort of due process to where they say this due process says that these aren't persons or people that matter or whatever under this form of due process. I think you just kind of in a very flimsy way, kind of applying due process in a just I don't know. You get what I'm saying?
No, yeah, no, because you're the one applying the term due process in a very flimsy way. I mean, the term due process, especially when it comes to the deprivation of life, that's a very specific term in American law. And I'm saying you're the one applying it in a very flimsy way because you're applying it to entities, in this case, human fetuses, that don't qualify for the benefit of that constitutional protection. And second, the process.
You can subjectively say.
Subjective. Oh fuck.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Man.
Go
ahead and finish. Sorry.
The point is, I mean, you can also point to a time where the Constitution, as amended, actually recognized the difference in the value between black lives and black humans and white humans, and you can say, well, that doesn't make it right. Well, I'm saying it does make it legal, and I mean, I think the the pro-life argument is in essence that where the law permits abortion under any process, that law itself is immoral, which I understand, and I totally accept that point. I completely see where you're coming from there.
Right.
I'm just saying, and I think this is a side issue. I don't want to necessarily bicker about it too much, but I'm just saying from where I sit that your use of the term due process is a little weird because what you're objecting to is that the process in law that ends with the termination of a human fetus is not a good thing. It's not a moral thing. So you're not objecting to the fact that there's no due process in terminating these fetuses. What you're objecting to is the fact that the due process that is being followed is legal but not moral, and the law should be changed.
Well, see,
I guess that would be a better way to put it. Without, I guess, we would need to have a better application of the due process of law because, I mean, like you rightly pointed out, it was legal to own slaves, but I guess in a legal sense they were applying due process, but you can kind of say that maybe we need to have certain changes in the law and have due process be given to them to say that they should have rights. So
yeah, and there are some legislators who do that.
Distinction to make.
Yeah, I think Tetrahedron wanted to pipe in there, but I'll just say real quick. I mean, there are a lot of legislators who are doing exactly what you just said, where they're encouraging to create an area of law where a fetus has some of the rights of personhood, and I that makes sense to me.
All right, go ahead, Tetrahedron. What do you want to say?
No, that's all I was going to say. I mean, if Antonio's arguing from the standpoint that the fetus should be afforded those rights. So from his standpoint, he's trying to get the fetus those rights, and for them to be afforded due process. As of right now, they're not afforded those rights. So I mean, it's just like a matter of semantics. I mean, but we all understand from the argument he's making that he's arguing that those fetuses should be afforded those rights and have a due process, basically.
Yeah.
Whatever that.
Right. And I think it's it's very simple. If a person has the right to, I mean not the right, but if they have the ability to forbid, not to forbid, but to prevent conception by simply refusing to have sex at this particular time, then they should not turn around and be able to kill the child because they did not want to use that 100% preventable method, and then whatever they did to prevent the child from being conceived and having sex didn't work, and then they say, you know what, I want to go get an abortion. This contraception method, whatever I used, didn't work. I'm going to go get an abortion. Well, you could have prevented that entirely by refusing to have sex to begin with. I don't think they should just turn around and be able to just take that out on the child. And there's the aspect of personal responsibility, because people just don't want to, assume personal responsibility. And it's my position that people care more about getting their personal rocks off than they are about assuming that mental personal responsibility and using restraint when they're not ready to bring a child into the world.
Yeah, maybe. Except I'm always wary when the conversation. Can we move to the issue of personal responsibility? Because I want to say there are a couple of things that you'd said. There's something you said 3 times every time I happen to be AFK, and I had wanted to really agree with you about it, and that was about really what people should be doing is not going and getting abortions, but to understand and apply the things you need to do, and including the personal discipline, to not get pregnant. I don't think any woman should ever desire to get an abortion. It's a horrible experience for them. It's not, just objectively, it's not good for a woman's health. Done properly, it doesn't create permanent problems, but that's not the point. If birth control could prevent that whole experience, of course you should do that. So I'm totally in favor of that. But then you always wrap up that point by heading straight for, well, people don't want personal responsibility. People don't want personal responsibility. And I have to object, and I want to say strenuously, to the idea that somebody who goes for an abortion, more so everyone who goes for an abortion, does so because of their refusal to embrace personal responsibility. Now, to make that point, I have to acknowledge that I'm very concerned about a whole group of people that shoulder shrug because abortion is available, and they go, or even something like Plan B. Like, I've known people that, young women that have said, like, well, I don't need to be on birth control because I don't really have regular sex partners, but then we'll, tear one off because they're drunk or circumstances or cute guy or whatever, and then they're like, oh, what was I thinking? And they'll run down and they'll get Plan B. That's a terrible way to live your life. Plan B is also very hard on a woman's body. Planning ahead of time, getting responsible birth control, living your life in a responsible fashion towards good sexual health is a lot better than taking Plan B once or twice a year because you had a little oopsie. That's something I completely encourage. Is take a look at that issue. Don't do the Plan B thing. So I'm concerned that the surgical abortion has that same role for a lot of people, where they're just like, oh, I had another. I don't want to derail us onto this topic, but I'm going to point out, I had a neighbor up until just a few months ago. We hate these neighbors. They're awful, awful people. But she was here with a friend, and her friend was crying one night. They were up drunk, and her friend was crying because she was pregnant and drunk and was going to have an abortion this upcoming week. And this woman was like, what are you crying about? Like, have you ever had an abortion before? And she's like, no. And she's crying, and she says, yeah, well, I've had 5. And she said it in this way, like, when you've had 5 abortions, then come talk to me. Then you can come crying to me. But for now, just shut up. And I was just like, my God, lady, you had 5 abortions? Like, you need to take a serious look at your life. So I want to say I'm very concerned about the subset of women who see abortion as, well, thank goodness I don't have to worry about timing my sexual encounters with my husband or boyfriends or whatever the case may be. I don't have to worry about birth control or any of that stuff because, oh, well, if it happens, I'll just go get another abortion. This is something I find very upsetting. But having acknowledged that that's there and that that's something that subjectively upsets me, and I'm sure everybody else in the room is sort of just as offended at any woman who would scream, well, I've had 5 abortions. Having said that, I want to strenuously object to the idea that every woman who goes for an abortion does so because of a failure of a sense of personal responsibility. I want to suggest, perhaps initially without explanation, but as I'm mindful of how much microphone time I take, I want to put on the table the possibility that there is a rather large slice on the pie chart here of women who are going for abortion, out of a sense of personal responsibility, and do so as a matter of sacrifice, which is going to be a really weird word to use in this context because I understand she's sacrificing her own fetus, but does so out of a sense of personal responsibility. It is not the case that these women go for abortions because, screw it, I'll just go have another one. Is that an uncomfortable thought for people?
Yeah, total nonsense, dude. So, brutalizing a child. Wait a minute.
That was adorable.
Wait a minute.
That was so
wait a minute.
sweet.
Wait. Okay, you didn't even. All right, hold on. So, brutalizing a child to death is personal responsibility to you.
What to death? What did you say?
I spoke for some time on the microphone acknowledging several concerns I had about abortion, and then I was suggesting the possibility that some women do this out of personal responsibility. Then I took pause to say, well, what do other people think about that? Can you acknowledge that's the case? Antonio, you referred to that as utter nonsense and then represented my position as brutalizing a child is an example of personal responsibility. That was literally your response to what I just said.
I don't care how many factors you want to try to juggle or whatnot, because they feel, they're doing something, out of personal responsibility. At the end of the day, she's still going into a clinic, and they're going to do something like, I don't know, perform a surgical procedure, maybe give her a pill or something. You're doing something to kill her offspring, all right? You can try to justify that a million different ways, but at the end of the day, you're just saying that, okay, because she feels like she's doing something, that seems to be of personal responsibility, killing her child is perfectly fine. That's absolutely ludicrous.
I'm not saying it's ludicrous to you. I'm not saying it's perfectly fine. I'm saying that I object to your characterization that every woman that goes for an abortion does so out of a flippant, screw it kind of an attitude, that I don't care, I'll just go have another abortion. You characterize people who go for abortions as being irresponsible, immoral, dunderheaded sluts. And I'm saying that there are some of those people that go for abortions, but I'm also saying, and I'm asking your opinion on whether you think it's possible, that many of the people who go for abortions do so with a heavy heart, wish that they weren't in those circumstances.
That's not exactly
you're rejecting
true.
it. You're rejecting it rudely.
Man.
You're rejecting it rudely and dismissively.
That's not exactly true of my position, because.
Go ahead.
Because you do have women out there who are often pressured to, get abortions. Of some women don't legitimately know that they have more options, and that that they can go to other places for people to help them, with the certain things that they may not be able to do on their own. And again, you do have women that, in many ways, may not be aware of their options, or they may be, pressured into getting one. And then those aren't the women I'm talking about. The women I'm talking about.
The women I'm talking about either.
Say what?
They're not the women I'm talking about either. Again, I raised an issue about some women who I think go make the decision to have an abortion, do so with a heavy heart, wish they weren't in those circumstances, and your response is to say, well, there might be some women who are pressured into it or don't know about these other options. Okay, well, that may be the case, but what about the women I'm talking about? So then you mentioned partway through, you say, well, I'm not talking about those women. I'm just acknowledging I'm not talking about those women either. Can we talk about the women I'm talking about? Although I suspect you think they're mythical.
All right. So let's talk about the women you're talking about. So you're basically saying, if they feel like, what they're doing is, with a heavy heart or whatever, again, what are they going in there to do? They're going in there to get a procedure to kill their offspring or child or whatever you want to say. They're going up in there. Does a heavy heart justify what they're doing? Does the heavy heart mean that they're using personal responsibility? And I totally object to that.
Okay,
maybe
well,
they're
look,
giving it due process. Maybe it's due process is what they're doing.
Yeah, okay. So suppose a woman. Suppose a woman had 4 kids, and then times are tough. The economy goes down, and they decide, well, I can't really afford these 4 kids, so I'm going to kill the 7-year-old and bury him in the backyard, and I'm going to do so with a heavy heart. If your question to me is, hey, Hogtie, is it your argument, and you didn't phrase this as a question, you just sort of declared this to be my position, that somebody who approaches something like that with a heavy heart, well, then it's justified. That is not at all my position. If you were to ask me if that were my position, should a woman be allowed to pick one of her 4 kids and just kill that kid and bury him in the backyard, and it's justified, is it justified because she does it with a heavy heart? My answer is no. That is not the sole justification, and certainly wouldn't rise to a level of sufficient justification if she's killing her 10-year-old kid.
Now, I was just just objecting to the point that it's sort of a form of personal responsibility if she sort of goes in with a heavy heart and she doesn't think that's an easy decision for her to make or whatever. That's sort of some personal responsibility. Killing your child is not freaking personal responsibility. I don't care, if you go in with a heavy heart or whatever. Killing your child, you could have done things to, prevent your child from being conceived in the womb in the first place. That is not personal responsibility.
Well,
You can try to argue it from a standpoint of personal responsibility all you wish by saying she may go in there with a heavy heart and think that's a hard thing for her to do. But at the end of the day, killing your child, you could have done things to prevent that child from being conceived. Is not personal responsibility.
Well, she may or may not, in the example I'm giving. Sorry, it's not even an example. I'm talking about if you were to make like a pie chart of how many women go for abortions, and I will acknowledge that there's going to be some slice of that pie of people who just be, oh, fine, I'll just go have another abortion. I don't think that's a very big slice. I think you guys very much overestimate. None of us have put numbers on it, so I want to be careful about accusing you of something here. But it seems to me like when I've heard you talk about it, I've heard like Nephilim Free, for example, talk about it, and it seems like you guys think that it's like 97% of the women that, or whatever, some arbitrarily large number of women that do it because, screw it, I can go have an abortion, and that just doesn't represent the truth of it. Now let's keep in mind, again, what you're doing is you're arguing against an argument not being made. You're responding to my claim, which I've not made, that because she approaches it with a heavy heart, that justifies it. And that's not what I'm doing. So try to remember like where that came from. I'm saying
personal responsibility.
Responsibility, right?
Your point was that she's going at it from a level of personal responsibility, and I'm just saying, the justification part was kind of a side point, but I did actually address the specific point about the personal responsibility part, and I don't think you can make a claim of personal responsibility when she could have done a number of different things to prevent that from happening in the first place, for her to even be in that position to begin with.
And many of them have done so. That's the other thing too, is a lot of the abortion uptake is for women who had employed various, sometimes multiple, birth control strategies. Again,
that's not 100%. That's not 100%, sir.
What's not 100%?
Unless she has like a full hysterectomy or something like that, there is no birth control method. Beyond that, that's 100%. So she did not, in fact, take all the precautions, because if you're not
No, it's reasonable. It's about taking reasonable precautions. But again, I want to be clear, just so we don't lose track of the breadcrumb trail here. The whole reason I brought up this subset of women who go for abortions is in direct response to a claim you made, Antonio, that I don't agree with, and that is your characterization that women who go for abortions are all these shoulder shruggers. Oh, well, screw it, I can have another abortion. I don't have to have any personal responsibility. And I'm suggesting to you that doesn't represent the women who go for abortions. That a significant number of them, and I would argue the majority of them, do it, that go for an abortion out of a sense of personal responsibility. I would agree. If you said that that's a very misplaced sense of personal responsibility, that would require some justification to say that that's personal responsibility, I would take your point. I would be like, yeah, I totally see where you're coming from. But what I'm asking is, do you not think that those people exist? Do you not think that there are women who have 3 kids already and go for an abortion because they're pregnant for a 4th time and they just simply cannot envision their family having 4 kids, and they do so out of personal responsibility, even a sense of responsibility that you would consider misplaced in that sense?
I would say they may feel like it's being personally responsible. They may feel that way, but again, I don't call that personal responsibility regardless of whether they feel that way or not.
Okay, then you judge it differently, and I accept that. You judge it differently. But again, my whole point was, when you say, as you've said a number of times, and I've heard many other Christian apologists say this, I know Nephilim Free really beats this drum a lot, where the
it ain't just Christian apologists, sir. It ain't just Christian apologists.
You don't even know what I was
put that out there right now.
You don't even know what my point was, so you don't know how to correct me.
All right, sorry, I apologize.
I'm saying I have heard I've heard from many people who oppose abortion, and notably the Christian apologists who make this point, and it's not all of the Christian. There are many Christians who oppose abortion who don't make this point that I'm about to repeat. I'm just making the point that a lot of the Christians do tend to go this way. Not all of them, but a lot of them do. Is that there's a narrative that the women who go for abortions are these sort of ditzy, who cares, sluts. Let's just use the word sluts. Call a spade a spade. You use that, not the word slut, but you used similar language before in describing, well, it's just Tommy Hall was in here before talking about this generation of people that just doesn't want to have any sense of personal responsibility. And it's a way of distancing yourself from these women that have abortions and to not walk a mile in their shoes, to just declare them, I wouldn't even want to be a person like that because they have no sense of personal responsibility. So what I'm saying, I'm not arguing justification here. I'm not even saying that I would expect you to agree with their assessment about the right thing to do is. All I'm saying is, Antonio, do you not accept that when it comes to looking at the pie chart of people who have abortion, some of those people are there because they shoulder shrug and say, I don't really care about using birth control because if I have an oopsie, I'll just get an abortion. And there are many people there who go out of their subjective assessment of what the right thing to do in their circumstances is. They do it out of a sense of responsibility to their existing family. Do you not agree that those people exist?
Well, if they truly believe that, of course those people exist. I never...
Okay. Yeah. Do you agree they exist? That's the main thing I'm trying to get at.
Well, I never said that those people didn't exist. Well, I just said that I don't call that personal responsibility. That's all I said. I never, argued against the point that, they may feel like they're being personally responsible.
Okay,
then I never said that.
Let me wrap up this point then on making this observation. I would like to ask you, and normally I would ask Tommy Hall to do this as well, except he never does. I would like to ask you to go back and watch the first 10 minutes of this hangout and listen to how you and Tommy Hall were discussing the set of women who go for abortions, and go back to like 10 minutes ago when you'd made similar comments. And just
I know exactly what I said.
Listen to your own words about your characterization about women who go for abortions, and see if you're comfortable with your description with that description applying to all women who go for abortions. Because I would say
I know exactly what I said, dude.
You're wrong for at least half of them, is my point.
End of the day, if you knew that you could have done something like, refrain to have sex at this particular time if you weren't ready for a child, if you knew you could have done that, but you decide to, just use contraception because you were just so, you was just so enamored with your own personal pleasure at that particular point, and the contraception didn't work, then you wanted to go get an abortion. I don't think that's personal responsibility by any stretch of the imagination.
It's not you. Wow. I'm not sure how to tell you this because I assume whether or not you've had sex is not the issue here. I would assume that sort of just culturally understood about I think sex has a couple. I don't think we should derail too far to the topic about sex, but I really object to your characterization that sex is about selfishness, about your own personal pleasure. Sex, especially, I will say actually, especially in a Christian household, has a very, very important role in unifying a couple. I can tell you.
I agree.
You seem not to, because you seem to say that. Okay, well, let me not do it that way. There is something so incredibly healing and restorative about sex, and I want to draw a very broad distinction here too. I had sex when I was in college. I had sex with like you do because you're a guy and there's a girl and you do it, right? And I will say I did very little of that. The vast majority of my experience was with long-term, not even like, oh, I've got a girlfriend now, but like long-term relationships. I'm pretty sure we're going to get married, and so I don't have much of that, but I know the drive, right? I know the vice to this just feels really good. But I can tell you that when you're in a relationship, especially a married relationship, there is so much healing and restorative about it. Yes, it physically feels good, but I know the thing about having a fight with the wife, and it's like, well, I thought you were going to empty the dishwasher. Well, I was halfway through emptying it, and then you started putting dirty dishes. Now I can't even tell which ones are the clean dishes and which ones are the dirty dishes. Well, I wouldn't have done that if you wouldn't have put them, what I mean? And you have that argument, and then you go into the bedroom, and the rest of the world is on the other side of that door. And sex is not, I'm going to say it this way, sex is not optional for a loving couple. It is something you do when you can. It's Anyway, I resist your suggestion that what people should do is just not have sex. I think they need to have sex responsibly, and understand, understand that it can lead to pregnancy, and need to take a look at their situation, and make the appropriate assessments of the type of risk they're willing to take. And a lot of times couples are like, well, we don't care. We're just going to have sex, and we have kids. We have kids. If we don't, we don't. But when you're in a state where you're like, look, we can't add another kid to this family, then you got to do those reasonable steps to make sure you don't have another kid. But to just wave your hand and say, oh well, you shouldn't have been having sex then because you could have gotten pregnant, is to very much misunderstand the context of sex in a marriage in a civilized society where birth control is available, but it's not 100% effective, and there are other options, including abortion.
Then again, you're just trying to have it both ways. You just want that door to be opened when you are not ready to fully take on the risk of having sex, because the fact of the matter is, outside of a total hysterectomy sort of birth control method, no other birth control method is 100%, which means there is that possibility that a pregnancy can happen. And if there's even a little bit of a possibility that pregnancy can happen, and you decide to take that risk, and then you want it to be like, well, I'm not ready to have a kid right now. I got 3 other kids. I'm not ready to have another one. Then tough break. If you don't want to...
then just stop having sex, eh?
Hold on. You can have sex all you wish, but if you're going to have sex, then you need to accept the possibility a child could be conceived at that particular time. If you're not ready to accept that, if you're not ready to accept the child at that particular time, then don't.
Yeah.
If you're not ready to accept that potential possibility at that time, then don't.
Yeah. Well, I will have to object to your statement that when you have 3 kids, you can have all the sex you wish, because you really can't. But I don't think. I'm sure I'm playing it's a pun. I'm just being silly.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. But no, I mean, I take your point. I just I think it's a little bit sort of not really attached to reality very well. That I think that there are people in the world who take reasonable precautions, and then the abortion question is, what do we do when people find themselves in those circumstances? And they can say, well, I wish we'd have used 2 condoms, or I wish we'd have used condoms and depot shots or something, like, but life doesn't always,
Again, it's just that you just have to have that door open because you didn't, because you want to have it both ways. That's why I have a problem with. You want that abortion door open because you want to have it both ways. You want to say, I used all these precautions and whatnot, but it didn't work out the way that I planned. So you want to have that door open to get an abortion.
You just you just trashed everything that's been discussed. But
I didn't.
Yes, you did.
No, I did not.
Because it's so simple for you, isn't it? It's just so simple.
All I said is that people try to have it both ways.
They don't want it both ways. People don't want it both ways. Married people want to have it one way. Married people want to have it one way. They want to have their birth control to work. They want their whole family planning. They want their family planning strategy to work. But this is the reality of modern life. I mean, 300 years ago, if they got pregnant again, well, then they just had another kid, and that was whatever, because you lived wherever you lived, you did what you had to do. Now in a modern society, there are a lot of different options. Things have changed, and families are required to do family planning, financial planning, and things don't always go the way you want. You can do your best financial planning, and the economy can have a downturn, or someone can lose their job or whatever, and you lose all your money. Well, then you got to be on welfare. Well, we live in a world where that sort of welfare is possible. So it's like turning to those people who are on welfare and saying, oh, well, you're going to you should have done some financial planning. Well, you want it both ways. You want to be able to earn money and spend money, and then when you don't earn money, well, you want to have people hand you money. Okay, well, that's a valid point. A lot of people actually make that point. And it's the same thing. People want to have their family planning work, and they don't want to have to go for abortions. But then what happens when their family planning strategies don't work? And they say, well, you know what, if we're 200 years ago, we just have to have this kid. Nowadays, and again, I recognize a little bit of circularity in here too, because people wouldn't approach it that way if abortion weren't available. And so the availability of abortion leads to abortion, and that's a concern that I have as well. But again, I want to wrap up on this point, because I think that, again, we get to these issues where what do you do? Because a lot of these things are judgment calls. And I just want to be really clear, and I'll even go back and listen to it, that part of the hangout before too. I just think that you don't do the discussion any favors when you sort of demonize not just people who have a different opinion than you, but when you look at these women who go for abortions and you demonize them as I heard, especially in the first few minutes of this hangout, as just being these irresponsible people. When I don't know, like have you ever talked? Have you ever in all of your discussions? I mean, surely at some point you've had a discussion with a woman who's had an abortion, and I don't mean a teenager. Don't tell me some story about a teenager that did whatever. But have you ever had a discussion with a an intelligent married woman who's 35 or 40 now, and she could tell you, yeah, I had an abortion 3 years ago because. You ever had that conversation?
Yes, and she's pro-life. And she regrets that decision deeply. But yes.
Yeah, I've talked to women who regret it as well. But what I'm asking is, have you had that discussion with somebody who said, yeah, I had an abortion, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, whatever, and it was difficult. I wished I weren't in those circumstances. We went through with it. It was the right thing to do for my family. I only ever had the one, but boy, it was. It was tough. Have you had that discussion with somebody who, in hindsight, wishes she hadn't been in those circumstances, but still thinks she did the right thing? I don't know if we lost Antonio's sound or mine.
So, yeah.
I think we lost Antonio again. It's funny. I haven't looked at the external chat for a while. Just waiting to see if Antonio comes back. Vegan comedian says, hog ties sound normal and sane, but sadly... Oh, okay. I was actually going to object to this, saying that I thought, because I read only the window was partway covered, and I thought it said, hog ties sound brainwashed and inhibited, which I was going to object to. I think I'll even object to it. It says that Antonio sounds brainwashed and inhibited. Is brainwashed the right word? I don't know.
Misguided, I would say. It's like a refusal to have it's like, I'm open to this conversation, but then again, I'm really not open to this conversation. Because it always can be just narrowed down to, you're a murderer, and you're, at the end of the day, anytime I hear the word at the end of the day, well, first I think of my man Jason Burns, and then I think of, well, this is just going to be a mischaracterization of what I've just said. And I mean, there is a lot of nuance, and anytime any nuances or situations are brought up where what about this, it can just, how nice is it to just have your opinion just black and white and handed to you, and not have to think about what if this, what if that. I mean,
well, I do want to say, Christopher, of your position and a couple of things you've said in the Hangout tonight, I really do support this, and I want to echo it. There are a couple of things you said that are really quick and to the point, and I'm afraid they come across as a little bit harsh, but I think it's also one of those it needs to be said kind of things, where you've pointed out to Antonio, who I do hope can hear us again now, when you've said, like, look, it's really easy to just take to take the moral high ground and say, well, therefore you people are wrong. I can't remember some of the phrases you said earlier in there. Like at one point you said, well, I think it's immoral to throw puppies in wood chippers. Go, you argue now. I do find Antonio is a little difficult in his way of just saying, Well, you guys make it too complicated. Actually, it's really funny because I was in an earlier hangout he'd done where I was saying, look, it's a difficult issue. It brings into play conflicts of rights and just these difficult where do you draw the line issue, and it's a morally challenging issue. And one thing I don't do is have conversations with anyone who says, well, it's not a difficult issue. Well, you know what? Nothing is a difficult issue if you're a closed-minded dink, right?
Right.
If you've decided that the CFL is better than the NFL, I need to help our international viewers. The Canadian Football League, which has only 3 downs and a wider field, it's a rough game. If CFL football, if you just say, well, the CFL is better than NFL, and some people want to make this really complicated, like it's just simple. Well, it doesn't matter what position you take. You can just say, well, I've got the answer to it and everything else. And for me, it's difficult. I do find appeal in the simplicity of just saying, look, it is the taking of human life. I agree with the sort of little bits of bickering, like a fetus is not a person because a person is a legal term. Killing a fetus is not murder because murder is a legal term. But that's I don't know why people want to argue about that. I mean, and they'll say, well, it is murder. It's murder. No, it's not murder because it's a legal term. But that's not the point. The point is, it is a moral wrong to terminate a fetus, and the fact of the matter is, there are millions of people in the United States and in Canada who have a justification for that. So you can't just simply look at all of those people. You recognize, and they recognize that the killing of a fetus is a moral wrong. And you see all these people who say, well, there are some circumstances where even that moral wrong is justified. If you just look at them and go, you guys are idiots. You're not even idiots, but you're assholes. Like they're so aggressive in demonizing people that have a different position. It really makes it, So anyway, I made this comment about how it's a morally difficult issue. And I don't have discussions with people who tell me that it's not a morally difficult issue. Well, the very next day, Antonio had a hangout that was titled something like "Pro-Aborts Try to Make This More Complicated Than It Really Is," and it was literally on that topic where he was just saying, "Look, it's really simple. You don't kill babies."
I think the oversimplification is kind of the problem when you're when you just reject all any scenario that's handed your way. But you brought up something earlier that I thought was really interesting, and I wanted to ask Antonio if he came back, and it would just kind of let me know where we're really at when having this conversation. I mean, is it the same thing for a woman to get pregnant and only be able to support 4 children? I mean, is it the same? Does he see it as the same thing as going and killing the 7-year-old in order to make room for this one, or having an abortion? I mean, the way that at least Antonio's and some other arguments are coming across, there would be no difference between doing that at having 10 weeks in abortion or killing a 7-year-old child. I mean, is that really where
connection problems?
We're good.
I think you made it. I think you beat the time limit too. My understanding is now the time limit is 8 minutes. It was 5, and then it was 10. I think they've now settled on 8, but you beat it, and I think we're still live.
Yep, we are.
Hey, Antonio, let me ask you something real quick. Is in the scenario where a family only has, they've scheduled their money and they've planned out, and they only have room for 4 children, and they're just barely making ends meet, and the mother gets pregnant, at, let's just say, 10 weeks or whenever. Do you see it? The question is, do you see her having an abortion the same as her going and killing the 7-year-old? Do you see it as the same thing?
Yes.
I would have guessed that would be the answer, and but only because of having had these conversations before, and for Christopher, if you find that answer as bewildering as I do, in that, I do think there are certainly some really good parallels there that it's not a radically different thing. I mean, you've got, now you've got 5 human lives, right? That, and you're choosing one of them to kill. It does seem different enough to me, just to to at least merit conversation. There is a difference between the 7-year-old and the 10-week-old, 10-week-old fetus. It always surprises me when somebody says, "Well, it's the same thing."
Well, of course you gentlemen would think that because you're used to hearing this nonsense.
Oh my God, Antonio, please. That's childish.
No, it's not.
It's super childish.
No, you're used to hearing this nonsense that the size and the location and all this other stuff, somehow magically has some sort of value difference or whatever.
Okay, I'm gonna retract my criticism of Vegan Comedian's comment. I initially had thought it was impolite to refer to Antonio's position as brainwashed and inhibited.
I actually think through everything else.
No, because the thing is, if you can come into a conversation and just say, "Well, of course you'd say that because you hold this position." I mean, come on, you're the one who listens to all of your pro-choice poster slogans, placard slogans, and abortion is murder and all that stuff. So that means I can dismiss anything you say by just saying, well, of course you're going to say that. If you think abortion's bad, well, of course you say that because you're brainwashed by all the people that tell you the nonsense they tell you. I don't care, Antonio. That's childish. That's childish, and you know it.
Arguments. I could actually back up what I say with arguments. Can you? That's the point.
No, you don't. You don't. All you do is you just repeat what your anti-choice crowd says, and when somebody comes to you with an honest, thoughtful position where they've said, look, I've had difficulty with this issue over the years, I've put thought into it, I've researched these issues, I've talked with people, I've processed a lot of opinions from a lot of different people over many years of really thinking about these issues, and here is my opinion so far at this point in my life. This is what I think about it. And then you can say, oh, well, of course you'd say that because of all the nonsense you've heard from the pro-abort people. That is childish and dismissive. And if that's the way you think a conversation goes, I can say the same to you anytime. I can just say, you're just reading, oh, go ahead and read your anti-choice placard slogans.
No, they're not just slogans. They're very, very detailed, specific arguments. I mean,
but mine aren't? But mine aren't? No, but mine aren't? Is that what you're saying?
Again, here's the thing.
No, but mine aren't? Answer that question.
Say what?
But mine aren't?
Well, I think whatever arguments you give, because you use like certain stuff like, the size or level of development, or saying, well, the unborn isn't really as developed as a 10-year-old, that's born, so it's different.
It is different. You just said
size and location.
You just said that something is different from something else, and therefore it's different. And you're saying that that's not a good argument. It's not an argument. It's an observation. You wouldn't even let the argument proceed.
Really, the only difference.
Let me prove you don't listen. That you just demonize other people.
Wait a minute.
Right.
The only major difference is where the location is. The other arguments that you use, because you're saying this unborn isn't as developed, as a 10-year-old, or it it hasn't experienced certain things, or
that's not an argument. That's not an argument. It's an observation. Several times in this conversation, you've told me what my argument is when all we were doing was arguing over an observation. I've made an observation about something simple, like it's different when a baby inside a womb is a different thing than a baby outside a womb, or different from a 10-year-old child. And then you've argued about my argument when I was just simply making a point. And the same thing, level of development. Yes, a 10-week-old fetus is different from a 10-year-old child. That's an observation. What does it lead to? That's a conversation we can have. But you objected to it, and you told me that my argument was bad. Let me ask you this, Antonio.
Wait a minute, dude. The whole point is about justification. You can't just sit up there and say that, they're different because of, location difference or size difference, and not offer a justification. You can't do that.
I can't do that because you would argue those points. Those were simple observations. You would then jump ahead and argue against an argument that I'd have. On occasion, when you would at least take a chance to argue against something even when it wasn't an argument I was making. On other occasions, you've just simply said, "Oh, that's total nonsense," or, "Well, of course you'd say that because your position." Let me demonstrate for you that you
I'd be
don't.
like, that's
You
total
are not
nonsense.
listening.
And I
That
would
you're
go
not
into
listening.
I'd say that's total nonsense, and I would go into the details as to exactly why.
You
It
didn't.
was just
You
a simple-
didn't. You didn't. You did not.
when did I say it was total
Just
nonsense?
now.
And not
Just now, you said that's total nonsense, and then you followed that up with the words, "Of course you would say that because of all the nonsense that you're
well,
fed
well,
by
you
the
started
pro-choice."
contesting. You started contesting, and I wasn't able to go into the detail because you started contesting my point before I was able to go into the detail.
Okay, let's try this. Let me ask you, at the beginning of this hangout, before I'd come in, you and Tommy were discussing my use of what you referred to as the self-defense argument. Can you, and you disagreed with what you called my use of the self-defense argument. Can you tell us what the self-defense argument is?
Well, I was really given sort of a rehashing of what I thought your position was, and that's why I said you can come in here and correct me if I misrepresent your position. So I mean, I don't know why you're asking me to give the self-defense position. All I was doing was recalling to the best of my ability what your position was. But of course, I could have missed certain things and misrepresented it, not intentionally. And that's why I was like, if Altai is listening, he can come in here and clarify if I missed certain things or if I misrepresented him.
Okay, and I do appreciate that. And I'm going to say amongst all these guys, you're amongst the more honest in that way. But I want to point out to you an example of something like that where it is straight up, no arguing, just demonizing the other person, not even demonizing their position, but demonizing the other person. So I'll tell you where the whole, when you referred to, when you and Tommy and I were talking, and I used the so-called self-defense argument, which was not a self-defense argument. It was a point I was raising in a direct contradiction to a point that you were making. You had said of me, of my character, of my very nature, that I don't value the life of the unborn. And I got kind of steamed about that. I really, really object to that sort of a characterization. Did
I not say in that hangout that, I apologize for that and I, decided to take a neutral position on what you had held at the time?
No, I'll tell you something. There's no neutral position on it. I heard you say, again, in this hangout, you were talking to Tommy and said, well, look, Hogtie and I talked for a while, and now I have a neutral position. And you know what, Antonio? I don't care if you have a neutral position on whether I value the life of the unborn, because I absolutely do, and I've told you that. And I don't take it as flattery in the slightest, or any sort of a nod of what I consider a person I am, for somebody to say, well, maybe he might value the unborn, but then again, I'm leaving my mind open to the fact that he's like, fuck it, throw those infants into the trash can, or throw, that's really offensive. The fact that I've been so clear.
That's how you then fine. That's
yeah,
how
I've been. Yeah, and I accept. That's fine. That's fine. If you don't, I mean, I guess I ought to thank you for being honest. If your assessment of my character is that there's a chance that I might value the unborn, but then there's maybe a chance that I'm not. So I'm going to sort of stay open-minded about that. If you're going to be honest about that, that's great that you're honest about that. I'm going to tell you that I still have every right to tell you you are simply wrong about that. That there's just no grounds to think that there's any room for thinking that I don't value the life of the unborn. But to make the point, when I first challenged you on it, then I want to get back to the self-defense thing. When I challenged you on that, I said, look, Antonio, you do not say of me that I don't value the life of the unborn. And your response to that was to say, well, actually, I have good justification. I understand you've backed down from this now, but I just want to make the point, because this is where the self-defense thing came up. You said, well, I have good justification for saying that you don't value the life of the unborn because, and then you asked me the question, do you think there are any circumstances where it's justified for someone to kill the unborn? And I said, yeah, I can think of any number. There are a number of circumstances where the unborn can be killed. And then you said, right there, you said, well, then that's it. I know that you don't value the life of the unborn. So then I said to you, Antonio, can you envision a circumstances where you might have to kill a person, or where some other person who kills a person is justified? For example, I use the example of a self-defense scenario where there's a killer that's been going around the city and they even have photographs of him. You know what the guy looks like, and then one day you're like, oh my God, that's the guy that's in my house right now, with my family. Like, that's the guy. So then, somebody actually kills that guy in the instant before he kills somebody else. I said, would you would you be okay with that? And you said, well, yeah. So then I said to you, well, then therefore, Antonio, by your logic, because you can justify somebody killing an adult human, you don't value the lives of adult humans at all, ever, in no circumstances, no how. So me bringing up the self-defense scenario was a specific contradiction to your claim that because I can think of a set of circumstances where it's justified to kill the unborn, that automatically means I don't value the life of the unborn.
Well, hold on. Let me bring up a little scenario for you. Let's say that I don't know, there's this person who has I don't know, let's say 4 children. All right, and you have this killer who's going to say, if you don't torture and rape one of your children, I'm going to I'm going to take them all out. But if you rape and torture one of your children, then I'll leave them alive. Would you think that that person valued their children if they decide to torture and rape one of them to save them all? Would you think that?
Okay, again, that example, aside from being highly contrived, I cannot possibly imagine how that is in any way connected to what I was saying. Now, there are several things wrong with the example. For example, what assurance do I have that the crazy person who wants the parent to, whatever it was, rape or torture or whatever, one of their kids, is going to be like, oh, well, thank you for doing what I asked. Good day, sir, and will walk out the front door. Anybody that would come into your house, like if this happened to me, let's say this happens to me, let's say I got 4 kids, somebody comes into my house, he's got control over the house, there's no way to run and escape, we don't have a way of calling 911, it's like some scene from Criminal Minds. This is like a really, really deranged person. And he says, okay, I'm not going to kill you guys, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to watch you torture your 3rd child right in front of your other kids. And if you torture that kid, rape and torture your own child right in front of your other kids, then I will unlock the doors, I will bid you good day, and off I will wander. If you don't do it, then I'm going to kill all 4 of your kids. What would you do? I don't know what I would do, man. I'm telling you what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't rape and torture my own kid, because how does that help? No, hang on a sec. I would have to look at the circumstances and see, well, what am I going to do? Because the thing is, do I have, like, what is he going to put down a deposit? Is he going to leave a $1,000 deposit that he's going to follow through and he's guaranteed to leave my family alone? It's a bizarre, contrived example that has nothing to do with what I was talking about.
Yes.
What I was talking about was your specific claim. Hold on. What I said was your specific claim, because again, you're trying to get me to answer some weird hypothetical scenario. I was addressing the specific point about whether or not I, and perhaps other people, value the life of the unborn. And then in using your logic, like to try to illustrate for you that just because I say, well, look, there are some circumstances where that death is justified, that your conclusion that automatically means that I just put no value on the lives of any unborn ever, that's ridiculous. And to show you how ridiculous that was, I used the example of an adult killing another adult. Don't you, Antonio, think that there are at least some circumstances where that's justified? Well, how would you feel if I said, oh, well, then therefore you don't give a damn about any human life ever anywhere? And instead of recognizing, oh, okay, it's a parallel situation. Just let me finish my point.
It's not a parallel situation. You cannot compare self-defense.
No. You got it all wrong. No. I'm comparing the logic of the situation. There's a set of human beings. I'm saying that it makes sense for. It's logic, man. It's straight up logic. There's a set. Okay. You know what? Okay, Antonio. You know what? Here's something.
Wait. Intentionally killing a child in the womb is not self.
Not the same thing. Oh my God, Antonio. Let me address that point. This is something you do. This is something you do a lot in these conversations. I think you do it by accident, but I got to point it out. You use a lot of analogies, and yet when somebody else uses an analogy, your response is 90% of the time. Your response is to say, oh, so you're trying to equate this and that. Or you'll say, That's not the same thing. And I always say right away, I immediately say, well, of course it's not the same thing.
Not the same thing.
Of course it's not the same thing. Okay, the comparison I'm drawing about again, this is not about justifying abortion. So pump the brakes there. This is not about justifying abortion. This is about your specific claim.
Justify abortion, then why are you using the point? There's no
Because, okay, great, I can answer that question. I can answer that question. Because you said that I have no value for the unborn. And when I asked you to justify that, you said, here's your logic. Okay, again, so the unborn, let's call that Group X. Group X is the unborn. If I can think of even one example where somebody killing a member of Group X, if I can think of even one example where it's justified for somebody to kill even one member of Group X, then by your logic it is fair to conclude that I have no respect for the value of any member of Group X. By that logic, I'm saying now Group X is adults. If you can think of one example where it's ever acceptable for a person to kill someone of Group X, then that means you have no respect for the value of any of the members of Group X. It is a parallel situation. Now, if you're telling me, oh, but the two examples aren't the same, well, of course they're not the same. In laying out, it's a logical argument. It's a logical argument. I'm using your exact same logic. Okay?
Well,
there's Group X, there's killing a member of Group X, there's your conclusion that that means the person who justifies the killing of a member of Group X therefore doesn't care about anyone in Group X. When I apply that exact same logic to your view about adult humans, all of a sudden, now it's not the same thing.
Because your self-defense.
I know it's not the same thing.
Self-defense example. Your self-defense example ain't got nothing to do with value. That's why it's just not even an arguable point. It has nothing to do with value when you're talking about self-defense.
That's not the, oh my God, it is not the point. Antonio, it's a terrible habit you've got of listening to someone else's analogy and then looking for differences between the thing. The whole point, analogies are good as far as they go. It's true of every analogy.
Did you bring, but you were talking about your value of the unborn. You can't use you can't try to use the point of self-defense, which has nothing to do with value, to make a point about value.
I'm just going to give up. It is a parallel, logical thing. I just repeat back to you what you said about me incorrectly. I mean, here's what really blows my mind about it, Antonio, is that this is a really basic point just of human dignity and just respect for somebody else in a conversation. For you to make a claim like that about my moral character, especially when I have insight into what I know and feel about children, about babies, about a fetus, when I know what's in my mind and my heart about being around a fetus or being around a baby, being around a pregnant woman, being around an old lady in a ward, in a palliative care ward, I know what those things are like. You claim to know my moral character, and further you claim to assess it to be something awful and monstrous and horrible. And when I object to it, you come up with these, like, I don't know. I think that's the thing. Is it whatever I said after that? Like when I say, look, Antonio, you're wrong about my moral character. You'd think immediately, you'd go, well, the guy knows, or you could argue it or whatever. But anyway, my point is that when somebody gives you an analogy, you never look for the similarity. The whole point of an analogy is analogies are always useful as far as they go. There are always ways in which analogies help somebody understand a situation, help somebody understand the point being made a little bit better. And then there's also analogies that don't work quite well. Right? And we have these phrases like people say, it's easier to put on slippers than to carpet the world. That's an analogy. If you think about it, it's a brilliant phrase. It's wrong in a couple of ways because putting on slippers, whatever. I'm getting tired. I'm getting frustrated with this, Antonio, because you say that you're open-minded, like to other people's positions and stuff, and yet when somebody comes to you with something they've thought about for years, instead of just disagreeing, you say, well, it's nonsense, or it's subjective, or it's arbitrary, and it's being dismissive and whatnot. Or when somebody tries to explain their position, anytime they use an analogy, you just go, oh, well, you're trying to equate this and that, or those two things aren't the same. Every time you tell me those two things aren't the same, I immediately say, of course they're not the same. It's an analogy.
Well, if you can find the specific differences and find out how they, direct to your point, then that's fine. If you can't, then don't use it.
Because at the end of the day, you just want to kill babies. That's where you always want to steer it back to. All the analogies and all the examples and all the arguments given to you, your basic response is you just want to shug your responsibility and kill the baby. That's what you really just want people to say.
That point was made explicitly the other day. I think it was in number 3 on this series. That point was made explicitly that people who support abortion access at all just want to kill babies every day. That point was said straight out in this hangout with no attempt at correction from anyone in here.
I think what's happening.
Yeah, that's easy to argue, isn't it?
I think what's happening here is that it seems like you gentlemen are trying to play the victim by using language like demonizing the other person. I think you just trying to just play the victim in order to get away from actually arguing the topic at hand.
No,
well, I think we're past that because it's not. I mean, trying to argue with you. We've tried to give you examples. We've tried to think it through with you. I have tried to talk this out with you, but I'll spend a lot of time talking about it, and then just you'll come back and say, at the end of the day, you're still killing a baby. I mean, that's what you want.
That's exactly
you want people to come in here and admit. You want to try to expose people and try to say, look at these people, look at how bad these people are, even though they try to rationalize it.
That's exactly it. You know what? He's got it exactly. Hold on, Antonio, because he's got it exactly right. That's exactly what I wanted to say. That is exactly it. Because you know what I want you to do? Go back and listen to that point in the hangout where I was saying, because again, I talk about these issues with a bit of a heavy heart. These have been very difficult issues for me to think through over the years. And I've come to you and I said something, I was making a point, I'm talking calmly, and then you started saying something, and then immediately I got irritated. I want you to find that moment in the hangout, and I want you to listen to and digest what you said in the moment before I started getting this irritated. And now you're saying we're playing the victim, and the reason is exactly what Christopher just said, that people, if you invite people in, and these are difficult issues, you invite people in and they say, well, yeah, it's difficult, here's what I think, and this is my opinion, I'll try to answer your questions. Sometimes I have to say I don't know, but then when you to go, well, you're being subjective, that's nonsense, and you guys just want to have it both ways, and these women are all sluts who have abortions. That's what we mean by demonizing. So don't criticize us for quote unquote playing the victim.
That's exactly what you're doing. And then
listened. No, because it's legitimate to play the victim when somebody comes up with personal insult in response to a legitimate point being made. And that's what you did.
In my main discussions with people who claim to be pro-choice over the years,
people who are pro-choice. You don't need to do that. People who are pro-choice. Go ahead.
You know what? Well, we're not going to agree on that. But in my main discussions over the years, it's always got to this point of you're just demonizing this. You're demonizing that. No, what's happening here is I'm challenging the moral bankruptcy of your position, and because you don't like that, now you want to play the victim and just saying you're just being demonized, and you don't want to actually deal with the relevant points at hand, but instead you want to, argue with your feelings all of a sudden.
No, that's not true. No, and that's unfair. You even saying that. And the thing is, it's appropriate to point out when somebody is pulling a weaselly trick like what you're doing now, where you say something that is personally offensive to the other person.
I've been arguing directly on these points.
No, you haven't. No, you have not. I'm sorry. Yes, you have been. Yes, you have been.
I've been arguing these points directly all night, like I said,
until a point. And then you stopped. Then you went to personal attacks.
Up until a point.
Up until a point. And I'm saying you can, I'll tell you what. I'll find the timestamp for you, and I'll send it to you as a PM.
How is a personal attack saying something like, if you don't want to risk bringing a child into this world, No.
You can't bring in a different example.
Oh, all right. Let me finish. You need to let me finish the point.
No, because that's goofy. Because you're saying, how is it a personal attack to do whatever? And then you're going to refer to something that wasn't a personal attack. right?
No,
Like that's
when have
come
I
on, man,
personally
come on.
insulted you, dude? When have I
Go,
personally
go,
insulted
no. Listen, we were having a nice conversation, and then there's a very specific point when I said that's childish. What you're saying, that's childish. Now what you're saying is, oh, well, how is it a personal attack to, and then give an example of something that happened 15 minutes before? Why not? Why not address the thing that we're actually raising?
Are you saying that I've personally insulted you? Yes or no?
Yeah.
When?
It's as soon as you said that. Well, I mean, several places. Initially, when you called into question my moral character, claiming that I don't put any value on that was a previous hangout. So let's skip that. Tonight, when you said when I had taken time to lay out a point that was considered and well thought out over years, and doing my best to explain it to somebody who I know doesn't agree with me. And won't come to agree with me over this, but just trying to understand each other's position better. And your response to that honest presentation of my thoughts on the issue was to say, well, you're just being arbitrary and subjective. And when I tried to explain to you how that was not a helpful rebuttal,
That's not only what I
okay,
said.
and then I know, and you said other things. Okay, but on this last occasion, all you said was, "Of course you're going to say that because because of the nonsense you hear from the pro-choicers." And I pointed out to you very quickly that, like, well, is that how you're going to argue? Is that really? And I said that's childish. So
And I
it's
can go
that
into
specific
further
thing that's
detail if
childish.
you like, and I can go into further detail with that point if you like.
Well, then you should have done so. You shouldn't have gone with the childish.
No,
oh
because
well.
because you contended with that point, and then we got into this sort
As
of.
I should have. As I should have. And then what you should have said was, sorry, that's not the right that's not the right thing to say. But you have, for the last 20 minutes, you've stood behind you saying that. You haven't for a second backed down and said, well, that's not really, you haven't acknowledged. In fact, what you did was you dismissed that anyone else has put any thought into this sort of issue at all, or struggles with it, or has something interesting or informative to say about it. You just dismissed all that. And you act like you're the only one who's actually putting any sort of thought into it. You're dismissive of it. And if it's actually your opinion that either me or Christopher Hitchslap has actually put thought into this, you've not expressed that. You expressed the exact opposite. And when we both challenged you on it and said, look, that's not fair, that's childish what you just said, instead of backing down from it, you've doubled down and you've doubled down and you're doubling down. And now what you're doing, which is really frustrating, is that when we object to it, when you do something like that and we object to it and say, look, that's not cool, that's kind of childish, is you say, oh, you're going to play the victim now. Like, how is it, like, when you point out to somebody, like, look, that's not fair, that's a bit childish, then instead of the person evaluating their own behavior just says, oh, well, whine, you're going to be the victim now. Good night, Antonio.
Can we actually break down the points instead of y'all whining about, this...
okay, you're going to call it whining? Good night and fuck you, Antonio. That is childish.
Yeah,
that's childish.
Have a good night, sir. Have a good night, man.
Yeah, I saw this going badly for you with just the antagonistic titles of the hangout. I mean, you're not gonna have an open, honest conversation with people if you're just gonna demonize them before they even come in the room. And you can say, go ahead and don't join, and that's fine. But trust me, not many more people will be doing it either.
Just being demonized. That's that language, and I've seen this way too often from people who claim to be pro-choices over the years. When you say stuff like you shouldn't have it both ways, and I think it's ridiculous that people want to have it both ways. They want to have that door open to kill their own offspring when they could have done something to prevent that 100%, by refusing to have sex at a particular time. When I say, I don't see how that's some personal responsibility at all, and then you want to say you being that's such just demonizing the person, and then we get into this freaking nonsensical argument about well, you're just trying to demonize me, and I say I just think that's ridiculous. You're just trying to play the victim instead of actually dealing with what I'm saying.
Yeah, what you said right there made no sense.
Well, because when I said
made
that,
no sense. It was gibberish.
When I said I don't see that, I don't see it as being personally responsible at all. When you knew full well you could have did whatever you could have did 100% thing by refusing to have sex at this particular point, if you don't do that thing that could have prevented 100% that this child would have been conceived in the womb, if you don't do that, and then the child is conceived, and you say, you know what, I'm not ready for a child now, and you still kill your own offspring, I don't see that as being personally responsible at all.
100% incoherent. None of that made any sense.
When I hold your feet to the when I hold your feet to the fire,
Nothing.
that you want to kill your own offspring when you knew you could have 100% prevented that possibility from happening, you want to get mad and say I'm demonizing you, and then play the victim.
That made no sense at all, Antonio.
Wow. What part of it didn't make
no sense?
What part of it didn't
Nothing.
make sense?
Nothing from the very first word to the last one. None of it made it was ridiculous.
Be specific and explain why it didn't make any sense, because you're just making an assertion, saying it didn't.
I don't know how to. I don't know how to explain that train wreck of what you thought an argument was. That was a terrible argument.
But merely saying it, it's a terrible argument, and merely saying it doesn't make sense doesn't magically explain why it doesn't make sense. You need to go into specifics.
Oh, it was just a terrible argument.
How? How? Explain how. I'm waiting.
Oh, I thought we were just able to declare someone's arguments ridiculous, and that's it. Like
But
you've
that's
been
not
doing
what I've
all
been
night.
doing all night. I can actually, I have went into specific detail, and the only time I wasn't able to go into certain detail at certain points is when we went into this pointless exchange about one person supposedly demonizing the other person, and then I have to defend myself, and we keep going back and forth, and we don't really actually deal with the points.
Okay. Let me tell you something that I do know, Antonio, and that is when you get these hyper aggressive people who want to champion a cause but are so shut off and not willing to listen to other people's points openly and honestly, the hangouts are slightly entertaining to watch at first, but the problem is you cut off the branches on the tree that you're sitting on. When you start shitting on the people that have an opposite view of yours, it doesn't last long. So if you think you're just going to shit on the very few people who join your hangouts and dishonestly misrepresent them, and you think it's going to last longer than a week, you're insane. So you should learn to have a little bit more respect for the people who do join your hangouts and quit shitting all over them.
We're dealing with an issue, about life and death. Okay, we're dealing with an issue about is it should it be morally justifiable or permissible to kill the unborn? Okay, and
if you don't respect the opposing view, you'll be talking to yourself. I guarantee it.
And hold on. And I think every single argument that you can make is absolutely just morally bankrupt to justify killing your own offspring when you could have prevented your own offspring from being conceived. And if you refuse to acknowledge the fact that you shouldn't have it both ways, either you accept the responsibility that you could conceive a child whenever you're not ready to, and don't kill your child, or you just don't have sex at all at this particular point. Or you may want to look into something like, I don't know, getting like a full hysterectomy or something, to be able to...
That's so insightful. People should just tune in to hear you repeat that for 3 hours in a row, because that's really all you ever say. That's all you're saying.
What it all comes down to is
either you're a baby killer or not. Wow, Antonio. Subscribe. Comment, rate, subscribe.
Hold on. Don't interrupt me, dude. What it all comes down to is, are you going to have it both ways? Are you going to have that door open to killing your own children, or are you going to accept personal responsibility for your actions and, be like, okay, if I have sex at this time, a child can be conceived from that, and I'm not going to, kill my child when I'm not ready because I didn't want to take those 100% precautions to prevent that from happening. You still want to have that door open and kill your own children. And when I call you out on it, you want to cry foul and say you're being demonized, and then use all this language to play the victim. And now we got into the nonsense we are here right now.
No, I'm just man to man. I'm just making a just an observation
Okay.
that you should take. You haven't been around hangouts that long, but I mean, atheists and Christian conversations have like this mutual agreement where you don't go in and completely shit all over the Christians opinion and talk all over them and misrepresent them, because if you have an echo chamber of a room, nobody wants to watch it, and quite frankly it's boring.
You know
And
what, sir?
you have the recipe for it right
You
now,
know what,
because
sir?
just think about it. If Hogtie hadn't joined and I hadn't joined, I don't see anybody else in this row that said a damn word. So you'd be talking to yourself, getting your message out to nobody, which is what's going to happen.
Well, you know what? It's up to people whether they want to come in and chat. If people don't want to come in and talk about the issue, then they don't. If I'm the only one talking, then so be it.
Yeah, so be it. I was just trying to give you some friendly advice, man. There's this. It's almost as fundamental as the agreement that the squirrels have on the road when we're driving. Yes, they can get out there, but get out of the way before the car comes through, and you're just crashing yourself into an echo chamber, and then no one watches. So there's your message.
And on that note, I do want to apologize for my specific language choice. I think I do want to stand behind. I do think I have every right to be irate with the way you approach this, Antonio, but the specific language choice doesn't really help. What I should have said was exactly what I've just heard Christopher Hitchlap say over the last few minutes, and that is about having just a basic level of respect for the other people, especially those that have an opposing view. And I think the reason for my frustration, which I'm a little embarrassed that I went to FU as a response when I should have said what Christopher said, was about sort of my disappointment because of the expectation. We have a lot of conversations in these hangouts about sort of goofy, pointless. I mean, like evolution, for example. I don't think it really matters whether or not people believe that humans share common ancestry with apes. I think people are still able to live their lives functionally and drive on the proper side of the road and, be moral people. It's not really that big of an issue, and it leaves for a lot of room for goofiness and ponage and a lot of jocular, silliness. Antonio, your hangouts are amongst the very few where you hold a set of them that are focused on a very important issue. And, you think about it, in the 1970s, there was a Supreme Court rule that made this essentially settled law in the U.S., and it hasn't settled it. Like, people are still discussing it. That just tells, that reveals what an important issue it is, what a difficult issue it is for people. And because, as you pointed out, Antonio, after I left, stormed out, as you pointed out, it's literally a life and death issue. I mean, this really touches upon, protecting the rights of the defenseless, right? And it's a difficult topic for everyone. I don't mean difficult to decide, because for some people it's quite easy to decide. But the discussion of it isn't easy. It isn't something we can be kind of fun and friendly and lighthearted about. But exactly as Christopher's pointing out, since it's such a difficult topic, and since your hangouts, Antonio, are amongst the very few in our little corner of YouTube where we're actually discussing a serious issue, and having had conversations with you before, my expectation really was that you would approach this with sort of a basic level of respect for other people's opinions and their presentation of their opinion. I fully accept that you're not going to come to agree with my opinion. I don't come in here with an argument that's going to make you go, oh, that's the reason why people want abortion. Oh, man, I've had this totally upside down for the last couple of years, and you're going to change your mind. But having said that, why tell people that you're interested? I come in here to discuss your opinions, to learn more about your opinions, to be challenged on my own opinions, to make the honest admission with myself about places where I think that my thinking on it isn't completely fleshed out or isn't completely justified. And to hear dismissive things from you, either about my moral character or about the thoughts that I'm presenting, is just like, come on, man, can you not do that?
Well, you know what, man? At the end of the day, I don't think killing children in the womb should even be an opinion, point blank. And if you don't like that, then
Well, it is, though.
problem not mine, sir.
It is. It is. Well, that's okay. Okay, then this is the really simple. Some of these, this is really, really simple. If you don't think it should be a discussion, then don't host discussions on it. That's really simple. Because what is the point? Do what Christopher Hitchlap is suggesting. Hold your little echo chamber hangouts. Don't put the link out there. Don't ever make the claim that you want people to try to provide some justification for their position, or you want to learn about these justifications. Because the other thing I heard you say is that it doesn't matter. There simply isn't another argument. Everything is, what did you call it, morally vacuous, morally bankrupt. If you've just predetermined that there's just everybody else out in the world that thinks differently on this issue than you, they're screwed up in the head in some way, then don't invite us in to have those conversations. Or maybe the rest of us need to realize, don't go to Antonio's hangout where he invites you to come in and present your opinions, because he's actually not interested.
I'm not going to say you're not invited, but if you choose not to come, then that's on your own volition. I'm not going to forbid you, or I'm not going to say one way or the other.
Well, I think that's a shame. I mean, I think that's the case, but I think that's a shame because, how many people, I don't know how to say it this way, but how many people, since you've been hosting these hangouts, how many people do you think are coming to your hangout? How do I say this? A lot of times I see people going to hangouts, it doesn't matter what the topic is, but they just come in with their opinion, and they're just there to sort of gameplay it, to just say, well, I'm going to make those strategic moves in the conversation so I can win the conversation. Versus, I would say a lot of people, versus how many people do you have come into your hangouts that say, I've thought about this issue for a lot of years. There's places where I think I've come to a conclusion. There's other places where I really struggle with it, but I want to get into a serious conversation about a serious topic, and can present the ideas like I do, or like Christopher does, or there's a number of other people. But how many people come in and do that? And if you're going to tell me that, oh, well, that's fine, like you've essentially told me several times tonight, I'm not interested in your opinion, Hogtie. You've asked me for justification. We've never gotten to a point where I can lay out what my position is, because we always bicker over some ridiculous detail. And now you're just telling me, like, it doesn't matter. I don't want to hear Hogtie's opinion on this, or what his thinking has been over the years.
I've just come to the conclusion that I don't really think there's any possible way to justify killing children in the womb point blank. I'm willing to hear your arguments, but whenever I deal with them, I'm gonna deal with them in the most logical way possible. That's the way I see it, and I have yet to have seen a single logical argument to justify killing a child in the womb, especially when you can do something so simple as refrain to have sex to prevent a child from being there to begin with.
Okay. Well, if you want to continue to shield yourself from the arguments that are different from your position, then just keep on the course that you're on. Just tell yourself and tell everybody listening that you think no such arguments are possible. And when people come in to make that argument, just tell them that their position is nonsense, and that, well, of course you're going to say that because you listen to the nonsense from these other people, and dismiss all of their thinking on the issue, and then you will be able to successfully shield yourself from those other positions. As I say, it's not an easy issue for some people, and it'd be nice to have a place where we could talk about those things.
Well, you know what, man. It seems at this point we've come to quite of an impasse, and it's unfortunate, man.
Well, I would suggest, and where the impasse comes from, and again, I acknowledge that this is a touchy issue for everybody. It's more touchy for people that continue to be open-minded on the topic, and those sorts of statements. There's a set of statements. I would encourage you to go back to that point in the hangout where the tone radically changed very quickly, and listen to the words that you used. And I would strongly suggest you drop those words from your vocabulary. In the same way that I suggest that I'm going to give you the other example, because this one you'll agree with. Everything that Christopher Hitchlap was just saying, which I just agree with, was great when he was talking about how there's a sort of rule about you don't just shit on the other people in the conversation.
Are you saying that all I did, or are you saying that's what I did, or all I did, or whatever you want to
No,
say?
not all. I think that you do have a lot of material where you address the specific issues. Don't take in this that you should defend yourself from the criticism that, well, that's all you ever do is every time somebody says something you just refer to their position as arbitrary, you refer to their position as subjective, because you have a lot of other stuff to say that's actually a lot more fleshed out. I'm saying that you got to take a look at that habit and see. If you catch yourself doing it, then stop doing it. If somebody calls you on it, then back down from it and just get back on the issues. Because here's a case where a good discussion was just destroyed by you saying stuff like that, and then me objecting to it, and then you just refusing to back down from it, but instead pushing even forward, even worse into criticisms of my moral character. And then the other thing, a phrase that I really, really strongly suggest you drop. Again, you're grown up. You can drop it or don't drop it. I'm just saying the way Christopher Hitchcock says, if you want to participate in hangouts, if you want to have these sort of vibrant conversations that are really illuminating with people, try to avoid telling them, oh, now you're playing victim. There's two really offensive things about that. One is the suggestion that the person thinks that they're somehow gaining ground, or for whatever reason, because they're doing these victim-like things. But there's also the implicit or even explicit suggestion that they're faking being the victim, and that is really unfair, because when you do something that is offensive to the other person, and they express that they're offended by that, then all you have to do is just say, sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Here's what I mean to say, and then go forward with it. But instead, to criticize somebody, I want to make the point too about you'll see, I'm going to do it the other way around, because I'll criticize atheists, especially younger atheists, who, when they're having a conversation with a Christian, and they say, like, how do you believe that stuff? Like, how do you believe that? Like, the guy nailed to the cross and went into space or whatever, And then the Christian says, well, you got to understand, like, you got to take this on faith, and then the Christian really lays out. Because Christians have to think about their faith. They have to, they don't just like one day say, yeah, I'm going to believe this. Like, they really have to ponder this thing about the set of events that are miraculous and astounding, that they believe in, that run so sort of contrary to everything else you see in the world. But then once they once they embrace their faith in Christ, the world really starts to make sense. And there's a lot of thought that goes into, when you're a believer, there's a lot of thought that goes into this. And then if you're talking with, especially usually a younger atheist, that just says, that's stupid. That's a fairy tale. That's just a fairy tale for adults. That's nonsense. You believe in magic. You believe in a genie. I criticize atheists for saying stuff like that, because I'm like, why did you even bother going into that guy's room if that's all you were going to do was just spray graffiti? It's just vandalism to go in and talk to somebody. I mean, I'll challenge people on their justifications or their foundational reasons for why they have faith in Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, or why they believe in a God at all, or why they accept the Bible to be wholly true, or whatever their individual beliefs are. I'll challenge people on those beliefs, but I won't just. It's not a challenge to anyone's beliefs to just say, well, that's nonsense. Well, that you believe in genies, or you believe in pixies, or like to just make fun of their beliefs dismissively isn't at all a challenge to their beliefs. It's just you being a jerk, and that's what I tell people. That's what I tell people who come in and just make those sort of hand-waving objections. And that's what I'm telling you tonight, Antonio. That's what you did with regard to my position.
Well, hold on. What if someone had the position that, let's say, I don't know, Asian people, weren't really persons at all? What if someone had that position?
I would want to know why they believe that, and how did they come to that conclusion. It'd be interesting to see what brought them to that.
That would be interesting. I would definitely have to ask about that. Yes.
You could just say you're a freaking racist and kick them out of the room.
Yeah, that's an option too. Yeah.
So,
but the other one seems a little more interesting.
Wait a second. Hold on a second, Antonio. Are you equating not liking Asians with having Christian faith?
Yeah, that has nothing to do with Christian faith.
So are you saying those two things are exactly the same thing?
What I'm equating is if somebody were to sort of have this sort of, I don't know, this sort of this sort of attitude towards, trying to depersonalize, if that's even a word, or sort of you know use language as if this particular person doesn't matter. I'm comparing that to the abortion issue because I
Okay.
feel like that's what's happening.
Are you saying that not liking Asians is exactly like having an abortion?
So what?
I mean, come on, I can't believe you. You're saying that not liking Asians is exactly like killing babies?
I think
That's what you're saying?
I think the principle is I think where the principle is the same.
Okay, so
There's not a
why
dead
is it?
baby at the end
Why
of
is it? That's right. It's not a dead baby. It's just a guy who doesn't like
I
Asians.
think the principle is the same.
Are you saying that you think?
It's just like the slavery example.
Okay, then Antonio, why is it?
Wait. It's just like it's just like the slavery example. This similar language that pro-choicers use to argue, for a woman to kill the unborn was similar language they use, to justify enslaving blacks in oppressive slavery.
Okay, why is it that you're perfectly capable when you present an analogy or a comparison, or when you ask a question, like you just came up with this, I would say, again, highly contrived example of somebody who doesn't think Asians are people, and you wanted to know what we thought about it. You're using that as a tool. It's a sort of an investigative question to say, I want to know what Christopher Hitchlaps thinks about this. I want to know what Hogtie thinks about this. It's not the same issue, but it gets at some of the underlying issues. So you're going to ask that question. Why is it that you're capable, when you do something like that, you're capable of recognizing that this analogy or this comparison that comes from the mind of Antonio is merely a simple analogy or merely a comparison that you're using to get at the heart of an issue, and yet you completely fail to recognize when anybody else does it?
I don't think that's accurate at all. And if someone brings up an example, I will explain why I don't think the example works. Not just
I gave plenty of examples tonight.
I believe you because when I believe you, Antonio, because when it was being handed back to you, you weren't picking up on.
He didn't catch it at all.
Can you explain why the example I give, as opposed, like with the abortion example in slavery, can you explain why that doesn't work?
Well, when it was being
the Asian people.
The Asian thing was being handed back to you in a very kind of ironic way. You weren't getting what was we're trying to illustrate a point by saying, what do you mean by Asians are the same as babies? And you just seemed to not get it at all, but that comparison was just kind of making fun of what you've been doing all night. And
I literally said what you say. I literally said what you say, but I even kind of chuckled and said it with a very sarcastic, kind of ironic tone of voice. And you literally didn't catch that's what I was doing.
Well, I brought that point up because I believe it's very relevant to why I would say that, if you guys are going to use sort of language to justify killing the unborn, and that's literally the same thing as using language to saying Asians aren't persons or blacks aren't persons, and oppressively enslaving them, and you would not take somebody seriously to use sort of language to justify.
What do Asians and blacks have to do with abortion?
Abortion, yeah. Right.
Hold on. You can hear their arguments out as to why they would think someone like Asians aren't persons or whatever. You can hear their arguments all day, but at the end of the day, you're going to think that person is a disgusting individual for thinking that.
No, right. I totally get that. And the way you just presented that, you said that you were making that comparison to raise that particular point. And I totally got that. The instant you did it, when you said the example, and about somebody not liking Asians or not thinking that Asians are real people, I totally got that that's what you were doing. Exactly as you just described it now. You said that you were just doing that to raise the point about how somebody could argue in this way. I totally got that. And that's why I sarcastically said, well, wait a minute, you're saying that not liking Asians is the same thing as killing babies? Feeding back to you the type of thing that you do when somebody else does exactly the same thing. When somebody else comes to you and says, Antonio, how about this? And they bring up a comparison. So, for example, when you said, you made this observation, you said that, okay, well, Hogtie says there is justification, at least some justification for killing at least some of the unborn. He hasn't laid out what that justification is yet, but he says there exists some justification. But based on that one bit of information alone, the fact that Hogtie says there is a justification for killing some of the unborn, the fact that he says that means that he has no respect at all for the value of the life of the unborn. When I say, okay, well, Antonio, what about somebody who justifies killing somebody else under some other circumstances? Does that mean that you don't value human life at all? The light bulb just it doesn't fizzle on. You don't say, okay, he's doing exactly the same thing. Instead, you want to point to a detailed difference between them. I use that example to raise the comparison. In that logic, the specific logic you were using to declare that because of one statement I'd made and not yet justified, that therefore I put no value on the life of the unborn at all. So I use the analogy then of somebody who agrees that it's okay, sometimes you have to kill an adult, to raise that point to your attention. And you didn't get the point. Instead, you objected to a technical factual difference between killing a baby versus killing an adult under some circumstances. And here it is days later and hours later within this hangout, and I still think that you're not getting that that's the comparison. And that's why I'm asking, why is it that you can recognize when you come up with one of these examples that you're just doing it to raise a particular point, but when somebody else comes up with one of these examples, you don't see the similarity. You immediately go to some technical difference that isn't raised. You don't look for, why would the person say that? What is the point they're trying to make? Instead, they're just wrong because you can identify some technical difference between their comparison.
Wait a minute. So I'm just merely looking for technical differences. Is that what you're trying to say?
I don't know why you do it. I think I mean, maybe you're kind of jumping ahead of what the other person's saying. I wouldn't want to guess why you're doing it. But yeah, I think sometimes you don't want to see what the person's point is.
Well,
so instead you look for what's wrong in their point.
Well, it's perfectly appropriate for you to feed it back to me and then go into detail if you don't think it works. And that's exactly what I would do with your points. I would go into detail on how I don't think it works. And
you don't. You pick on some irrelevant detail. You don't address the point being raised. You instead pick on some irrelevant detail. In fact, you don't even do that. The first thing you do is you say, oh, so you're trying to equate this and this, or you say those two things aren't the same. You always open with one of those two lines, and then you point to some irrelevant detail.
Okay. I don't think I do that at all. I think I always show why it's exactly relevant. Like, what was the point you used earlier? I think the point you used, like, for self-defense, where you was trying to use it for, a value sort of point, and I was just saying that, self-defense has nothing to do with the value. I don't see how that could connect with your point in any sort of way.
Because that was one of the premises. Okay, let me do it in syllogism form. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
If Antonio can justify, if Antonio can justify the killing of a member of set X, it's not a syllogism. I can do it. If Antonio can justify killing a member of set X, then that means Antonio does not have any regard for the value of any of the members of set X. And then premise 2 is Antonio says he can justify the killing of a member of set X. Therefore, conclusion, Antonio has no value for any of the members of set X. The reason where value comes into the example is because it's included in the major premise of the argument. Okay, so let me just so I'm clear, because I'm not sure if you caught that. Just say yes if you totally know what I mean, then just say sure. But how it comes up is you have this premise in your mind that if Hogtie can justify the killing of any single unborn ever, then therefore Hogtie must have no respect for the value of the lives of the unborn. And further, Hogtie says that there is justification for killing the unborn sometimes. Therefore, Hogtie has no respect for the value of any of the lives of the unborn whatsoever. And I'm saying let's apply that exact same structure. Antonio says that he can justify killing of, say, you know, a Mexican who's in his house, who's going to kill his family. Well, then Antonio doesn't value the life of, you know, Antonio doesn't value the life of Mexicans. That's how value comes into it, because it was in the premise of your argument.
I think the point would be more like this. Let's say you hate Asian people, but for some reason you find, you know, one that you get along with very well. It's like, you know what? I think you're cool, but you know what? I still can't stand Asian people. How could you value that one person? You know, how could you, you know, value that one Asian person when you talking about how much you hate Asian people?
I don't know. I don't know. I guess you know what? Yeah. Okay, fine.
Are you
That's
still
a
not
different.
getting
That's
the
a different
connection,
example. It's got
Antonio?
nothing to do with what I was talking about. It's a different example. But to address your point, yeah. Okay, sure. I guess if I said I hated Asians, and then I claimed I had an Asian friend, that probably doesn't make me a person who doesn't hate Asians. But that's got nothing. Again, I'm going to restate. That has nothing to do with the example at hand.
I think it does.
Well, you
Look,
can think that, but
Antonio,
it's
you
straight up.
made
It's
a
straight up logic. Like it's straight up parallel structure in the logic.
you
Because
made
go
yeah
ahead.
So
you made
you talk
a
about value X, okay? Like you made this value argument, okay?
No, you did. But yeah.
Okay, well, fair enough. You saying that that I was making a value argument. All right. So would the logic that you used for that example, would that apply in the same? Why would that not apply in the same way with the example I just gave of Asian people? Why would?
Okay, because again, to go back to what the first premise was that if you know if person A can justify the killing of any member of set X, any single member on any occasion come up with any justification at all, even one little bit of justification for killing even one member, then that means person A does not value the lives of those people, any of the people in set X. You then change that to, well, okay, how about this example? How about somebody who says, I hate all Asian people? But then it turns out there's one Asian person that they don't like. It's got nothing to do with killing those people, nothing to do with about the value of their lives or anything else like that. Plus, the biggest relevant difference is the application to the set. So in the first example where you say, you know what, I value the lives of everybody in this set, but there are circumstances that I can justify killing one of those people. Versus the other one, it is I hate all Asian people. Right? I mean, in one case we're talking about taking of lives, the other one we're talking about hate. But even if you change that, even if you just said, you've got one person who says, I value the lives of everybody in set X. Like I value the lives of all Asian people. But I can see some circumstances where you got to kill an Asian guy. I hope somebody sound bites that out of this hangout.
I think the hate thing makes it a little bit more complicated. The point is, Antonio, you made a declaration about someone's morals because of an answer they gave to a question, and when a scenario which is the same except replace baby with adult was posed to you, if you were to answer there could be justification to kill somebody, then why can't that same declaration just be pasted on you because of your willingness to kill just one adult? Why not say that you don't care about human life altogether? Because that's what you just did the other way around. If you'll kill one, you'll kill them all. Is basically
because
that's the
self-defense.
conclusion you come to.
It doesn't matter what your justification is. It doesn't matter what your justification is. Just the fact that you claim you have justification means that you don't value any human life at all.
Because self-defense is not the intentional killing of somebody. All right.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Self-defense is the intentional killing of someone.
No, you know, you may end up killing them, but I mean, if it's necessary to, you know, take their lives out, isn't because you did it by intention. It's because you did it
Yes,
by
it is.
necessity to preserve your life. It's
No,
not.
you did it by intention. You did it by intention. For one thing, again, I want to restate, it doesn't matter what your justification is. All that matters is that you claim such justification exists. And to be clear, don't hide from this. In the same way, remember we talked about this the other day about how I don't like. Hold on a second. This is important.
I was make it very clear about the intentional killing of somebody.
Yeah, you were intentionally, when you kill somebody in self-defense, you're intentionally killing them. In the same way, remember.
No, it's not. It ain't even remotely the same thing.
I didn't say it's the same thing. I said it's intentional. I'm not talking about whether it's the same with some other killing. Killing of a fetus and killing of an intruder in your home are different in many relevant ways. Who cares? The point is, it is intentional. In the same way, you're going to remember we talked about this the other day about how some other people don't like the language about killing a fetus.
So you only focus.
And I said you have to come to grips with that. When we're talking about abortion, we are talking about killing a human fetus, intentional killing of a human fetus. That, people, you got to own it. That's what abortion is. In the same way, if you are going to kill an intruder that's in your home, if you're going to take a gun that you have available and you decide, I need to end this, and you point that gun at the middle of his chest and you pull the trigger 4 times, knowing that his heart is at the business end of that gun, you are intentionally killing that person. You can argue that perhaps it is not premeditated because you didn't plan to do so 4 days ahead of time, but it is intentional killing. You mean to end that person's life.
Wait a minute. So you ignore context,
No, I do not ignore context.
You ignore context entirely and just play a semantic game on the word.
It's not semantic. Stop it.
Yes,
That's
it
the
is.
shit I'm talking
Just so
about.
you know, Antonio,
That's the
this
shit I'm
is
talking
the
about.
exact.
This is exact. Yep.
That moment.
Exactly.
You
You
listen
are
to.
clearly ignoring context.
You are completely ignoring my point. I don't know if you're doing it on purpose or because you don't understand, and instead of just asking for clarification, I'm not ignoring context. I'm saying, okay, hold on a sec. Are you stuck on the point about intentional?
Wait a second.
Are you stuck on the point of intentional? Is it intentional killing?
Hold on.
Is it intentional killing?
You're focusing on the phrase intentional killing. There's clearly context behind that when you're dealing with.
Yes, there clearly is, exactly as I said 2 days ago, and exactly as I said again today. Yes, the context is important.
Going into an abortion clinic and killing a child.
They're not the same thing. They're not the same thing. They're not the same thing. Do you need me to say they're not the same thing? They're not the same thing, Antonio. The reason I'm focusing on intention for the moment, the reason I'm focusing on intention is because you initially had said that killing a home intruder is not the intentional killing, and I'm saying yes, it is intentional killing. Do you think it's not intentional?
I stand corrected on that. You're right about that.
Okay, well then don't criticize me for focusing on it if it was a point that merited correction.
With the example you gave about the intruder in your home, yes, that is intentional killing.
Mm-hmm. And you would say, even if you don't give a justification for it, you would say that there exists some justification. Or even if it's not that example, you can imagine, or sorry, not imagine is the wrong word. If I were to ask you, like Antonio, yes or no, is there ever justification for ever killing a person ever? You say yes. You might even be able to think of a few examples, but it doesn't matter. Just the fact that you say that there exists justification, even if I don't know what that justification is, even if you don't sit down and type out a list for me of the top 7 justifications for killing another human, just the fact that you say there exists justification tells me, according to your logic, that you don't have any respect for human life at all whatsoever. Now again, that's only if you adopt your logic. And that's why I'm saying I don't think you mean to say that to other people who when it comes to the life of the unborn, the people see what you did the other day. This is so tedious because I'm repeating myself. So I really want this to be the time that the light bulb goes on and that you say, "Oh, I see what you mean." Mm-hmm. The other day when we were talking with Tommy, you took the position that if I could say that there was justification for killing even one unborn, that meant right there, just that one little fact, that I said there existed justification, even if I didn't give that justification, just the fact that I said there existed justification, that meant that Hogtie has no respect for the lives of the unborn at all.
Mm-hmm.
Now, killing the unborn and killing a home intruder, there are many, many relevant differences in there, but I'm saying that the structure of that argument, your conclusion that I have no respect for the life of the unborn, based solely on my claim that there might be justification for killing one of them, it's factually incorrect. It's logically incorrect. As I say, it's factually incorrect. It doesn't reflect my actual view on that, and it really doesn't help the conversation, because you're telling me that you've just drawn this conclusion about my moral character based on this argument. And when I tried to point out to you that it's not a good conclusion, you instead went to the technical detail about what the specific justification might be. I'm not saying those things aren't important, by the way. Sorry, I'm not saying those things are not unimportant, by the way, because I do think that, when somebody says, well, there's a justification for killing, well, then you know what? That's an interesting place for the conversation to go, because I'd love to hear that, right? I would love to hear someone's justification for killing a human being. Like how do you justify that? That's setting the bar pretty high. But for you to just conclude, well, then that person's a moral monster, and to tell them to their face that you don't even want to hear their justification, that's the conversation closer as far as I'm concerned.
So is it your position that you only have value in certain circumstances and only in certain cases? Is that your position then?
No, it's all valuable.
But at least you asked. I can. That was good.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, I will say this. I think I will say I apologize that you don't value the unborn in general. I will say that. You don't value the unborn in general. But
what are you apologizing for? Because it sounded backhanded for a second.
Well, it was better than
really
saying judgment. So.
But having said that, I still find your position troubling, that you would think, again, because I started this hangout to start a conversation about, the general reason, why pro-choicers would argue for abortion. I'm not, not using, the cases like life-threatening issues or rape or whatever. I was looking for a justification for, let's say, a woman is not ready to be pregnant at this particular time, and she goes into a clinic and gets an abortion. I was looking for justification for that sort, of a decision that she would make. All right, and having apologized for saying that that don't mean you don't value the unborn in general. I still can't come to grips with why you would think it's okay to have a general position that a woman should be able to go into an abortion clinic and kill her child if she's not ready to have one at that time.
Yeah, and I agree, and I appreciate that, Antonio, and I do expect that's for as long as we're going to continue talking about this over the coming weeks or whatever, that's probably where you'll still be with it, and that's fine. I respect that. Let me just say, and I'm actually going to say this as part of saying goodnight. I think we got to a good place here and creeping up on when I should have been in bed a couple hours ago. But let me say this. You said a moment ago that you still find my position troubling. And I need you to know something, Antonio. So do I. That is, I find my position troubling. This is not an easy issue for me. And I want you to think through for a moment, what if I didn't value the lives of the unborn? What if I felt that they were just useless lumps of tissue, and whatever fun and zeal and vigor you have for life, and you get one of those little tissue lumps inside you, then screw it, just scrape it out, flush it down, whatever you got to do. I don't care about those things. Do you think I would be troubled by my own pro-choice position?
If you looked at it that way, I don't think so.
I would not be troubled at all. And that's why I will say, in bidding you good night, I want you to think through this idea about what I think about the unborn, what other people who think like me think about the unborn. The only reason that I find my position difficult and troubling is because I do value the lives of the unborn, and we got to get into a specific discussion about that value, like how that value works and what it means. And well, wait a minute, if you do value the lives of the unborn, how can you ever justify someone killing them? I think that's an important discussion to have. But like I say, I just sort of want to, if we got to a good place here, I should probably just go to bed. I should have done so a couple hours ago, but I really, I appreciate and enjoy this conversation. But like I say, you refer to my position as troubling, and as long as you know, I refer to my position as troubling as well. And it's not because I don't value the lives of the unborn. It's precisely because I do value the lives of the unborn.
Okay, sounds good. I think I totally agree. I think we can go ahead and call it a night on that. So, again, I I guess having misread that, or just made a wrongful conclusion about your position, again, I offer my apologies, and it's, I didn't intend for the discussion to get heated and mudslinging as it did, and I'm going to try to do a better job of not allowing that to happen in later hangouts. But I absolutely agree that we can end this hangout on that note. So to those.
Okay, so real quick, I appreciate that. I want to say this was actually the most fun and energizing, enlightening, and well-intentioned hangout that I've ever been in. We're partway through. I told the guy to F off. This is so. I want to thank you for that, Antonio. That was. I appreciate your last thought.
I still always respect your honesty, Hawk Tie, and you too as well, Christopher.
Oh well, I appreciate that, Antonio.
Yep. All right.
You got to get a good closing line, man. Or do you have one?
Yeah, I ain't got one yet. Maybe I'll keep working on that. But for right now, just thank you for watching, everybody. Good night.